Rock Creek Cemetery in Washington, D.C., is more than just a place of stone monuments and shaded paths. Established in 1719, it is the city's oldest burial ground, and with that age come centuries of whispered tales, unsettling encounters, and spirits who seem unable or unwilling to rest. Beneath the weight of marble angels and weathered crosses lies an invisible world, a place where grief lingers like fog and history presses close against the living. Visitors often speak of the quiet beauty of this sprawling landscape, but those who stay too long after sunset carry away another story entirely, a story of footsteps echoing down empty lanes, phantom figures that drift among the mausoleums, and voices that seem to rise from nowhere. Tonight, we walk carefully among the graves, lantern in hand, and explore the 25 most chilling hauntings of Rock Creek Cemetery. Listen closely, for in this place of silence, even the softest whispers might belong to the dead. The Adams Memorial, better known as the Weeping Angel of Rock Creek Cemetery, has long been a source of both artistic admiration and supernatural dread. Sculpted in 1891 by the renowned Augustus Gaudens, it was commissioned by Henry Adams to mark the grave of his wife, Clover, who had taken her own life. From the day of its unveiling, the bronze figure has carried an air of sorrow so profound that it unsettles nearly everyone who lingers too long in its presence. Cloaked in a heavy robe, its head bowed, its face obscured by shadows, the Weeping Angel is less a statue than a monument to despair itself. Those who come to see it are often struck first by its sheer size and solemn beauty, but very quickly, unease creeps in. Many visitors swear the angel's expression changes depending on where they stand. At one angle, its features appear cold and detached, almost empty of emotion. Shift slightly, and sorrow bleeds across its face, as though the weight of grief carved into bronze has momentarily become alive. Some describe its lips as curling down into a deeper frown when no one else is looking. Others claim the eyes, though hollow in design, seem to follow them relentlessly, never blinking, never breaking their gaze. It is not just the shifting expressions that disturb the living. For generations, people have reported being overcome with inexplicable waves of grief near the memorial. Perfectly content, visitors enter the small clearing and suddenly find themselves choked with sadness, as though a personal loss has just struck their lives. Many admit to breaking down into tears without knowing why, their emotions hijacked by something they cannot explain. The sorrow carved into the statue seems to seep into their bones, dragging them into the despair Clover Adams carried to her grave. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site consistently record anomalies. Temperature drops are common, sudden cold spots hanging in the air even on the warmest summer nights. Electronic equipment, from cameras to EMF detectors, is notoriously unreliable near the angel. Batteries drain, recorders fail, and static hums through devices, as though the bronze itself radiates a disruptive energy. Some claim to have captured faint whispers on playback, indistinct but heavy with emotion, sighs, sobs, or muttered words too quiet to decipher. Then there are the accounts that defy all logic. A handful of visitors who dared to touch the statue at night have reported feeling icy wetness on their fingers, as though water dripped down from the angel's face. One man swore he felt tears run across the bronze cheeks beneath his palm, though the skies above had been clear for days. Another woman described pulling her hand away, only to find her fingertips damp and chilled, as though she had touched a living being weeping in silence. These claims, though unverifiable, persist across decades, told and retold by those who leave the cemetery shaken and pale. Legends have grown from these stories. Locals whisper that those who touch the angel at midnight risk carrying its sorrow home, cursed to feel Clover Adams's despair as their own. Others believe the statue is less a work of art and more a vessel, that in its cold, bronze body rests the trapped spirit of grief itself, feeding on the living who dare to approach. Skeptics dismiss such tales, chalking them up to suggestion, to the eerie power of great art and the unsettling knowledge of the tragedy behind it. Yet even the most hardened disbelievers admit there is something profoundly unsettling about the memorial, something that lingers long after one walks away. At times, visitors report feeling watched as they leave the angel behind. Some glance over their shoulders only to swear the figure has shifted, its robed body leaning ever so slightly, as if it were turning to watch them go. A few describe a heavy presence following them down the path, pressing close until they reach the gates of the cemetery, where it finally lifts. Whether this is paranoia or the true reach of the angel's sorrow, no one can say. Over the decades, the weeping angel has become more than a memorial. It has become a sentinel of sorrow, standing guard over the graves with an aura of eternal mourning. Its legend grows with each new tale, with each tearless cry of grief from visitors who should have no reason to weep, with each shiver in the warm night air, with each phantom tear traced by trembling hands. To some, it is simply a masterpiece of American sculpture, an artist's triumph that captures the depths of human loss. To others, it is a haunted relic, imbued with the restless energy of tragedy that refuses to fade. But to all who stand before it, one truth is undeniable. The weeping angel is alive in its own way, a shadow of grief that reaches across time to touch the hearts of the living. And as the years pass, its sorrow does not fade. It waits patiently, cloaked in silence, forever weeping bronze tears that no one can explain. A reminder that some grief never dies. It simply lingers, carved into stone, echoing through eternity. In the quiet expanse of Rock Creek Cemetery, where marble monuments rise like frozen guardians, and centuries-old oaks stretch their limbs across winding paths, stories cling to the air like mist. Among the many tales whispered in hushed tones, none is as enduring or sorrowful as that of the wandering widow. She appears most often in the twilight hours, when the setting sun casts long shadows across the rows of gravestones, and the wind rustles the leaves as though the dead themselves are stirring. Witnesses describe her as a solitary woman, dressed in funereal black from head to toe. A dark veil obscures her face, thin enough to hint at her features, yet heavy enough to cloak her expression. In her hands, she carries a bouquet of wilted flowers, their petals drooping as though long past their prime. Slowly, deliberately, she moves among the stones, pausing occasionally to lean down, as if reading the names carved into the granite markers. No one has ever heard her speak. Visitors who have attempted to approach her, to offer help or even a polite greeting, report only silence. Her steps are unhurried, her posture stooped slightly forward as if weighed down by grief. The air around her often grows cold, a damp chill that seems to cling to clothing and skin. Those who trail her describe the sound of her heels clicking faintly against the stone walkways, a measured rhythm that sometimes halts suddenly, only for her figure to dissolve into nothing. The most chilling accounts center on the Adams Memorial, the famous weeping angel. On nights when the widow is seen, she often makes her way toward that monument, bouquet in hand. Witnesses say she lingers there, standing before the cloaked bronze figure, as though sharing in its sorrow. Some believe she kneels at its base, her head bowed, before vanishing entirely. It is as if she is drawn irresistibly to the grief embodied in the statue, her spirit recognizing the sorrow it symbolizes. Local lore paints her as the grieving wife of a Civil War soldier. According to the tale, she had spent her final years searching for her husband's grave. But confusion and poor record-keeping denied her the closure she desperately sought. When she died, her spirit was said to have risen, still bound to that quest, forever wandering the cemetery in search of the man she loved. Whether or not this story holds truth, it has become inseparable from her legend. Visitors imagine her reading stone after stone, hoping in vain to find his name etched into eternity. Paranormal investigators have been especially fascinated by her appearances. Many groups have left audio recorders in areas where she has been seen, and some claim to have captured faint sounds of weeping. The sobs are quiet, muffled as though buried beneath layers of time, but unmistakably human. Others report strange fluctuations in their equipment when trailing her, sudden spikes in energy readings, or batteries draining in seconds. The cemetery itself seems to bend around her presence, amplifying the grief she carries. Perhaps the most unsettling detail comes from those who have observed her flowers. More than one witness has sworn that the wilted bouquet she clutches transforms before their eyes. One moment the petals sag and brown with decay, the next they appear fresh and blooming, their fragrance briefly perfuming the air. Then, just as suddenly, the flowers wilt once again, and the widow fades into the night air, taking her sorrow with her. Some interpret this as a symbol of the life and death she cannot escape, the cycle of love that bloomed brightly and withered in war. For cemetery staff, her legend is a quiet reality. Groundskeepers have spoken of seeing her figure gliding along the rows at dawn, when the mist curls low across the earth. Security staff admit to spotting her on night patrols, sometimes on footpaths, sometimes standing motionless at a distance. They know better than to approach. One guard once attempted to follow her, convinced she was a living woman lost among the stones. He trailed her all the way to the Adams Memorial, only to see her fade like smoke, leaving him alone with the silent angel. The guard resigned the following week. The wandering widow is not a spirit of menace. Unlike the darker hauntings that unsettle visitors with terror or malice, she embodies sorrow itself. Her silence, her bowed figure, her eternal search, all serve as a reminder of grief as power to outlive flesh and bone. Those who see her often leave with a heaviness in their hearts, as though her mourning clings to them. A shadow of loss that does not belong to them, but insists on being carried for a time. Some say her endless walk through the cemetery is a kind of devotion, a testimony that love does not simply vanish with death. Others argue it is a punishment, a cruel loop of searching without ever finding, an eternal mourning etched into the soil of Rock Creek. Whatever the truth, her presence endures as steady as the monuments she passes. In the stillness of the cemetery, where history and sorrow intertwine, the wandering widow drifts like a living memory. She is grief given form, a reminder that love and loss are threads that bind the living to the dead. And as long as Rock Creek remains a place of mourning, her figure will continue its solemn journey, veil lowered, bouquet in hand, forever searching for the man she cannot find. In the shaded corner of Rock Creek Cemetery, tucked away from the main paths where most visitors tread, stands a fountain of stone. Its basin is cracked, its edges worn by weather and time, and no water has flowed through its veins for decades. Moss grows along its rim, and ivy winds its way around the base, as though nature itself has claimed it back. To anyone passing by, it appears nothing more than a relic, forgotten and lifeless. But those who linger there know the fountain is not silent. Strange accounts have gathered around this place like fallen leaves. Visitors who pause in its shadow often claim to hear the faint sound of laughter, the high, ringing tones of children at play. The voices drift in the air with an uncanny clarity, as though the fountain was still a gathering place, a source of life and joy. Yet when one looks around, the space remains empty, the grass unbroken by footprints, the silence resuming as swiftly as it was disturbed. Many have spoken of seeing movement near the fountain, quick flashes of small figures darting behind headstones. Their size and shape suggest children, their forms flickering in and out of sight like reflections in broken glass. Those who attempt to follow them find only empty paths and still air, as if the little ones slip between the living world and some hidden place beyond. For groundskeepers, the fountain has long been a place to avoid after dusk. Some recall hearing the unmistakable sound of splashing water while on patrol, though the fountain has been bone dry for generations. Others swear they have heard the playful squeals of children running in circles, their laughter echoing in the stillness. One veteran groundskeeper admitted that on a foggy evening, he glimpsed the surface of the dry basin rippling, as though filled to the brim with water invisible to the eye. He turned away and never went back to that corner after dark. Among the many chilling encounters, one story has been told more often than any other. A woman visiting a relative's grave wandered near the fountain at twilight. She noticed what she thought was a little boy, no older than 7 or 8, standing at the fountain's edge. He was dressed in clothing from another age, a short jacket, knickers, and worn shoes, as though he had stepped out of a century past. His small hands rested on the stone rim, and he seemed to be staring into the empty basin. The woman, thinking he was lost, called out gently. Slowly, the child turned to face her. Where eyes should have been were hollow sockets, black voids that swallowed the fading light. She froze in terror as his form began to dissolve, thinning like mist until it was gone. The fountain stood empty once more, the air heavy with the memory of her scream. To this day, she insists she had not imagined it, that the boy was as real as her own breath, until the moment he vanished. Even more unsettling are the accounts involving children who visit the cemetery with their parents. Time and again, mothers and fathers have reported their little ones pointing toward the fountain with delighted expressions, as if greeting friends. Some children laugh and wave at the empty air, describing playmates the adults cannot see. Parents whisper of their children tugging at their hands, asking if they can go join the others by the fountain. When pressed to describe them, the children often mention boys and girls in old-fashioned clothes, smiling, waiting for them to play. Paranormal investigators have spent long nights near the fountain, attempting to unravel its mysteries. Recorders have picked up the faint sound of giggles, and on rare occasions, a child's voice whispering words too soft to decipher. Cameras left unattended sometimes capture strange streaks of light, or brief silhouettes no taller than a child of 10. One team described an unnerving cold that seemed to cling to the air around the fountain, even on warm summer nights, as if the space itself was frozen in time. Theories abound as to who these spectral children might be. Some believe they are the restless souls of young ones buried nearby, still drawn to the fountain that once provided cool water on hot days. In the late 1800s, cemeteries often doubled as park-like spaces where families would gather, picnic, and spend time among their departed loved ones. Children, it is said, would run and play, their laughter filling the grounds. Perhaps their spirits have lingered, replaying the innocence of their short lives in the one place that brought them joy. Others whisper of darker possibilities. The empty-eyed child, they argue, suggests something more sinister than innocent play. Perhaps the fountain is a gateway, a thin place where lost souls gather, unable to cross fully into the beyond. Some go further still, claiming the laughter is a lure, meant to draw the curious closer, as though something unseen feeds on those who dare to approach. Whatever the truth, the fountain remains one of Rock Creek's most unsettling mysteries. To walk past it in the daylight is to see only a ruin, a dry basin overtaken by time. But at night, when the cemetery is cloaked in silence, the air around it stirs with echoes of life that should not be there. The sound of laughter drifts across the stones. The splash of phantom water rises from the emptiness, and shadows of children flit between the graves. The children by the fountain remain, not frightening in form, yet haunting in their persistence. They are reminders of lives cut short, of innocence preserved, yet trapped in eternal play. Their presence lingers in the broken fountain's shadow, a spectral chorus of laughter where no one stands, forever weaving joy and sorrow into the heart of Rock Creek Cemetery. The Phantom Procession of Rock Creek Cemetery is one of its most whispered-about legends, an eerie sighting that has chilled visitors for generations. Those who walk the central lanes after dark, when the moonlight spills in thin silver streams across the gravestones, sometimes report seeing a slow-moving parade, a line of shadowy figures stretching farther than the eye can follow. These figures march in solemn silence, their heads bowed low, as though bound to a ritual older than memory. Some appeared to carry dim, flickering lights like lanterns, their glow pale and wavering, casting long, quivering shadows across the ground. Others move with hands folded, their silhouettes indistinct, yet unmistakably human. The procession always seems to fade into the distance before vanishing altogether, leaving only the stillness of the night behind. Accounts of this strange sighting share a striking similarity. Witnesses describe the figures as dressed in old mourning attire, women veiled in heavy black lace, men in tall hats and long coats, their faces hidden from view. The line of mourners is said to flow with a strange gravity, as if each step follows a rhythm unseen, a pulse of grief that stretches through time. Some believe they are not individuals at all, but fragments of memory, shades caught between centuries, repeating their walk of sorrow endlessly. One of the earliest recorded accounts came from a groundskeeper in the mid-20th century. Making his way home after a late shift, He saw what he thought was an unusually large funeral gathering, moving through the main path. He stopped and removed his cap, out of respect, and waited for the line to pass. He later swore that he watched for nearly 10 minutes as the mourners filed silently by. Yet not a single voice spoke, nor did he hear the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel. When he looked again, the path was empty. The only sound was his own breath and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Modern-day visitors echo the same descriptions. One woman recounted her experience of standing at the cemetery's center, feeling an inexplicable chill crawl up her spine. She turned and saw a wave of dark forms approaching, dozens of shadow-like figures carrying faint lights. She froze, unable to move, as the air grew heavy with what she described as the sound of absence. When she finally dared to close her eyes, the figures passed her by. When she opened them again, the lane was empty, though the fading echo of footsteps still lingered, tapping faintly against the stones. Paranormal investigators who have studied Rock Creek often suggest the phantom procession is tied to the cemetery's long history of funerals. Since its founding in the 19th century, Rock Creek has been the final resting place for thousands, including many notable figures. In its earliest years, funerals were grand public events. Entire families and communities would gather, walking the lanes behind horse-drawn carriages, dressed in mourning clothes, carrying lanterns if the ceremony extended into twilight. These parades of grief were woven into the fabric of the cemetery's past, and some speculate the ground itself has preserved them, replaying the sorrow of those moments like a recording etched into stone. Yet others believe there is more than memory at work. Witnesses consistently describe a palpable sense of dread when the procession appears, as though they are intruding upon something not meant for the living. The silence of the figures is said to press against the chest, making it difficult to breathe, while the faint glow of their lanterns seems not to illuminate but to darken, as if their light belongs to another world. Those who have seen the procession warn never to cross its path. The instinct is overwhelming, to step back, to bow one's head, to avoid drawing the gaze of figures whose eyes may never open. One chilling account tells of a man who tried curiosity, led him to step forward, attempting to approach one of the figures carrying a lantern. He claimed that as he neared, the air grew impossibly cold, and the figure seemed to slow its step. For the first time, he felt its attention turned toward him. He described a sensation of grief, so crushing it nearly brought him to his knees, as though centuries of mourning had been poured into his soul. He fled, and has never returned to the cemetery after dark. For many, the phantom procession is not just a haunting, but a reminder. It embodies the weight of centuries of loss, of lives gone and mourned, of rituals performed by those left behind. To witness it is to glimpse not a ghostly individual, but an entire tide of grief, a wave of humanity stretching across time, forever walking the lanes of Rock Creek. The cemetery itself seems to encourage the legend. Its broad paths, framed by towering trees and historic monuments, already hold the somber air of ceremony. At night, with shadows stretching long in silence, blanketing the ground, it is easy to imagine those who walk there before returning to trace the same steps again. Yet those who have seen the phantom procession insist it is no trick of the imagination. The line of mourners is too vivid, too vast, too real to be dismissed, whether it is the ground replaying history or spirits bound together in their eternal march. The phantom procession remains one of Rock Creek's most haunting mysteries. To see it is to feel the presence of all who came before, their sorrow echoing endlessly through the night. And for those who watch it pass, there is always the lingering sense that grief is not confined to the past. It moves with us, through us, and sometimes it marches right before our eyes. The Keeper of the Gate is one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most unsettling legends, a figure who seems less like a ghost and more like a sentinel, always watching, always waiting. For generations, visitors and staff have spoken of a tall man in a dark cloak who appears near one of the cemetery's oldest entrances. He is most often seen just before dawn, when the sky is bruised with the first hints of daylight, his silhouette etched starkly against the pale glow. At first glance, he seems like a living man, a lone mourner, or perhaps a caretaker standing vigil at the threshold. But those who have tried to approach him quickly discover the truth. The figure dissolves into thin air, vanishing as though he had never been there at all. Witnesses describe him in uncanny detail. His height is imposing, his cloak long enough to brush the ground, the folds blending with the shadows around him. Some swear he carries a lantern, though its light is dim and strange, illuminating nothing beyond a few feet, as though it glows only for him. Others claim his eyes give off a faint radiance, glowing softly in the darkness, like embers waiting to spark. But the most unsettling accounts describe a face that is not a face at all. Only emptiness beneath the hood, a hollow void where features should be. Local lore has given him a name, the Keeper of the Gate. Unlike many of Rock Creek's phantoms, who wander the grounds in sorrow or replay echoes of lives long gone, the Keeper seems purposeful. He does not drift aimlessly, nor does he vanish into corners of the cemetery. Instead, he stands firm at the entrance, his posture commanding, his presence unmistakably that of a guardian. Some believe he protects Rock Creek from those who would enter with disrespect or ill intent. Others think he guards something within the cemetery itself, keeping it from spilling out into the world of the living. Paranormal investigators have taken a special interest in the old gate where he is said to appear. Many report unusual spikes in electromagnetic readings, as though the very air there carries a charge. Cameras and recording devices often malfunction, batteries draining without explanation, lenses fogging even on clear nights. One investigator, determined to capture evidence, positioned himself near the gate before dawn with his camera ready. When he reviewed the photographs later, he found an image of a cloaked figure standing in the frame. Yet the figure had no face, only the outline of a hood where features should have been. He abandoned the project soon after, claiming the photo filled him with a dread that lingered for weeks. Those who have seen the Keeper firsthand describe a chilling sensation that accompanies the sighting. The temperature drops sharply, breath visible even in the warmer months. An oppressive stillness takes hold, muting the usual sounds of the cemetery. No rustle of leaves, no chirp of birds. Some say it feels as though time itself pauses, as if the Keeper's presence draws the living moment into a frozen state. When he disappears, life resumes. The wind stirs again, and the silence breaks. Not all encounters are brief. One account tells of a man visiting the cemetery in the early morning hours, hoping to photograph the statues at sunrise. As he walked through the gate, he noticed a cloaked figure ahead of him, standing motionless in the dim light. The man assumed it was a caretaker until he drew closer and realized the figure's feet made no sound on the gravel path. No shadow stretched from his form. The Keeper turned slightly, and though his hood was lowered, there was no face beneath. Instead, the man described seeing what looked like endless darkness, deeper than night, staring back at him. He fled in terror, never reaching his destination. But not all interpretations of the Keeper are rooted in fear. Some visitors believe he is a benevolent spirit, a guardian who ensures the sanctity of Rock Creek remains intact. A handful of stories suggest that those who entered the cemetery with reverence felt protected in his presence rather than threatened. One woman recounted how she became lost among the graves at dusk. As panic set in, she noticed a cloaked figure ahead of her, standing near the gate. Though she was frightened, she followed, and soon found herself guided back to the entrance. When she turned to thank the stranger, he was gone. This duality, protector or warning, is what makes the Keeper so mysterious. He does not behave like the restless dead who relive fragments of their lives. He seems aware, deliberate, intentional. His place at the threshold suggests a deeper purpose, as though he were not merely haunting Rock Creek, but actively guarding it. Some even speculate he is not tied to any one soul, buried there, but is instead something older, a spirit born of centuries of mourning and memory. A sentinel forged from grief itself. Whether he is a protector of the living, a warden of the dead, or something that bridges both worlds, the Keeper of the Gate stands as Rock Creek's most enigmatic figure. His silent vigil, his watchful presence, and his chilling vanishing act all point to a spirit unlike any other in the cemetery. For those who glimpse him, The experience is unforgettable, leaving behind a memory that feels less like a ghost story and more like a brush with something eternal. To stand before the keeper is to feel the weight of the boundary he guards, the fragile line between life and death, between this world and whatever lies beyond. He is not simply a phantom. He is the sentinel of Rock Creek, forever watching, forever waiting, the eternal guardian of the gate. The Mausoleum Whisperer is one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most chilling legends, a tale that has unsettled generations of visitors and groundskeepers alike. Among the cemetery's many monuments, one mausoleum in particular seems to breathe with a strange life of its own. Its stone walls, weathered and scarred by more than a century of time, loom darkly against the rows of headstones. The iron doors, etched with patterns now dulled by rust, hold fast against all intrusion. And yet, when the sun falls and the grounds grow quiet, whispers seep from within, soft, fractured voices that should not exist in a place sealed for eternity. Those who have ventured close describe the whispers in unsettling detail. Sometimes they sound like prayers, low and mournful, the syllables falling into patterns too ancient to decipher. Other times they are sharper, more frantic, words spilling over one another like an argument abruptly cut short. No one has ever been able to make sense of them entirely, for the whispers seem to shift as soon as one tries to listen too carefully. It is as though the dead themselves are caught in conversations unfinished, their voices clawing their way through stone in a futile attempt to be heard. Groundskeepers whose duties often bring them past the mausoleum at odd hours speak of a heaviness that clings to the air around it. It is not the quiet solemnity of grief that permeates the rest of Rock Creek, but something denser, almost physical, pressing against the chest until breathing feels labored. On certain nights, the sensation grows so intense that workers refuse to pass near the mausoleum at all, taking longer routes just to avoid the oppressive atmosphere. And then there are the doors. Massive slabs of wrought iron. They have been sealed for decades, the families entombed inside, long since forgotten by living relatives. Yet witnesses claim the doors do not rest quietly. On nights when the air is still and the trees stand motionless, the iron rattles violently, as though fists pound against it from the inside. The sound reverberates down the stone path, echoing with an urgency that chills the blood. Those brave enough to investigate find nothing. No intruder, no animal, no storm to explain the noise. Only silence, the kind that feels heavier after the chaos has ceased. The most unsettling accounts come from those who dared to press their ears to the iron, hoping to catch the whispers more clearly. Many describe hearing fragments of conversation, murmured pleas, urgent commands, sobs that taper into silence. But nearly all recall one thing in common: a single voice rising above the rest, repeating the same haunting question. Is it time yet? The words are simple, yet they carry a weight that gnaws at the mind. Time for what? For release, for reckoning, for some unfinished duty. No one knows, and perhaps no one wants to. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site speculate that the mausoleum may house spirits restless, in their confinement, bound to the stone by ties too strong to sever. Others suggest it is not the spirits of the entombed who whisper, but something older, something drawn to the concentrated sorrow of generations laid to rest. Electronic equipment often malfunctions near the mausoleum. Recorders pick up bursts of static where silence should reign, and on rare occasions, voices too faint to belong to the living world. One team reported capturing a low, rhythmic chant on tape, voices overlapping in tones so distorted they seemed to vibrate through the speakers. At the end of the recording, a pause, then the faint but unmistakable words, "Is it time yet?" The group abandoned their investigation soon after, unnerved by what they had heard. Visitors drawn by curiosity rarely linger. One man, a historian researching the families interred in the mausoleum, described an experience that left him shaken for weeks. While sketching the structure at twilight, he felt the air thicken around him, as though invisible hands pressed against his shoulders. The iron doors shuddered, though there was no wind. Then came the whispers, faint but insistent, wrapping around him until he could no longer ignore them. When he leaned closer, a single voice rang clear. "Is it time yet?" He dropped his pencil and fled, unable to shake the sensation that something behind those doors had been speaking directly to him. The legend of the Mausoleum Whisperer has given rise to countless theories. Some say the spirits inside await a day of judgment, forever questioning whether their release has come. Others believe the repeated phrase is tied to a tragic story buried with the dead, perhaps a soul who never saw their final moment fulfilled, left to wonder eternally when it will arrive. A darker idea suggests the voice is not a plea, but a warning, that whatever stirs behind the doors is not waiting to leave peacefully, but for the right time to emerge. Whatever the truth, the mausoleum has become a place of both fascination and fear. Tourists are drawn to it by tales of whispers and rattling doors, yet few dare to test their courage by listening too closely. The groundskeepers, who know Rock Creek better than anyone, treat it with a wary respect, lowering their voices and quickening their steps when passing by. Even the birds and animals seem to avoid its shadow, leaving the air unnaturally still. To stand before the mausoleum is to feel the weight of unseen eyes, the press of voices straining to be heard. It is a reminder that some stories never end, some arguments never find resolution, and some questions echo long after the living are gone. The Mausoleum Whisperer remains one of Rock Creek's most haunting mysteries, a voice repeating through the centuries, a question unanswered. Is it time yet? The Lantern in the Oaks is one of the most whispered about legends of Rock Creek Cemetery, a story that has persisted for generations and left even seasoned investigators unsettled. The grove of oak trees, tall and ancient, forms a natural cathedral of branches and shadows. By day, their presence is majestic, the canopy filtering the sunlight into a golden haze that softens the cemetery's silence. But at night, the grove takes on an altogether different character. The oaks loom like guardians, their trunks casting long, skeletal shapes across the ground. It is in this stillness that the lantern appears, a faint glow drifting between the trees, swaying softly as though carried by an unseen hand. Those who have witnessed it describe the lantern as delicate and old-fashioned, its light flickering like a flame trapped behind thin panes of glass. It hovers at about the height of a person's hand, never rising too high, never sinking too low. It moves with a rhythm that suggests purpose, forward and steady, pausing here and there, as though its bearer were scanning the graves or searching for something lost. Many have tried to follow it, but the moment they draw too near, the lantern shudders violently, its glow flaring and then extinguishing as if swallowed by the darkness. No trace remains. No heat, no smoke, no footsteps, just a cold emptiness of the oaks and the silence pressing down. Locals have given it a name, the mourner's lantern. They believe it belongs to a restless soul, still searching for a loved one's grave. Perhaps it was once a widow who walked the cemetery paths, lantern in hand, searching in vain for the resting place of a soldier who never returned. Perhaps it was a grieving parent who could not accept the loss of a child. The stories vary, but they all circle around the same idea. The lantern is not just light but longing, a manifestation of grief too heavy to release. Paranormal investigators have spent long nights in the grove, hoping to capture the phenomenon. Many leave with photographs containing strange orbs of light, sometimes clustered around the oaks, sometimes trailing in faint arcs as if moving. Skeptics dismiss the orbs as dust, insects, or tricks of light, but those who've been present insist the experience feels far beyond coincidence. One investigator recounted setting up a camera on a tripod, pointing it toward the grove. As the team waited, they noticed a faint glow materialize between two trunks. The lantern appeared, bobbing gently along the path. They stood frozen, watching as it drew closer, its flicker steady and purposeful. When one of them whispered, "Do you see it?" The lantern flared, then blinked out. Later, when reviewing the footage, the camera showed nothing but darkness. Yet the photographs taken by hand revealed three distinct spheres of light floating among the trees. Stories of the lantern often include a peculiar detail, the sensation of being watched. Visitors describe the hairs on their arms rising, as if unseen eyes lingered just beyond the glow. Some feel overwhelming sadness, as though the grief that animates the lantern bleeds into their own hearts. Others report a calm, almost soothing presence, as if the lantern-bearer meant no harm but simply longed for company in their eternal search. A few, however, speak of dread, a sudden bone-deep fear that compelled them to turn and flee before the light could vanish. One of the most chilling accounts came from a night watchman in the 1970s. He was patrolling the grounds when he spotted what he thought was a trespasser carrying a lantern. Determined to confront them, he followed the light into the grove. The lantern bobbed ahead, never too far, always just at the edge of reach. He quickened his pace, then broke into a run. But as he neared, the glow flared, blinding for an instant, and then was gone. The watchman stood panting in the darkness, his flashlight beam cutting through empty air. Later, he told colleagues he had not only seen the lantern, but heard faint footsteps crunching the leaves, pacing alongside the glow, though no one had been there. Even today, the grove of oaks draws those curious enough to test their courage. Some bring cameras, others come with nothing but their nerves and a hope to glimpse the mourner's lantern. Most leave empty-handed, yet unsettled, describing the peculiar stillness of the grove and the feeling that something just beyond sight walks the path with them. A few capture unexplained flashes of light in their photos, always near the trees, always hovering just above the ground. What keeps the legend alive is not just the sightings, but the emotion it stirs. The lantern in the oaks is not a violent or terrifying haunting, but one drenched in sorrow. It embodies the grief of lives cut short, of separations never mended, of love that could not be laid to rest. To see it is to witness a sorrow still searching for resolution, a light that cannot be snuffed out because the longing that fuels it remains. The lantern in the oaks stands as one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most poignant mysteries. Whether it is a spirit still searching, a trick of the eye magnified by imagination, or some natural phenomenon yet to be explained, it continues to draw witnesses into its quiet orbit. The image of that lonely light, bobbing gently between the oaks, lingers in the mind long after the darkness swallows it. A reminder that grief, like a flame, flickers but never truly dies. The Stone Hands is a gravestone unlike any other in Rock Creek Cemetery, a marker whose ordinary appearance belies the unsettling stories attached to it. By daylight, it looks like a simple monument, a weathered slab of gray stone, its surface etched with two hands clasped together in a gesture of eternal unity. The edges are rounded with age, lichen creeping over the surface, and the inscription barely legible. Many passersby glance at it, perhaps noting the beauty of the carved hands, but no one would suspect the activity that occurs once darkness falls. As the sun dips behind the trees and the cemetery falls into twilight, the gravestone seems to awaken. Witnesses who remain after sunset report an almost imperceptible movement. The carved hands appear to tighten, fingers curling as if grasping each other with renewed urgency. Some say it begins subtly, a gentle shift, almost like the stone itself is breathing. Others insist the hands move more deliberately, fingers flexing, knuckles pressing deeper into the stone, as though the figures are still very much alive and holding on to each other against an unseen force. One frequent visitor, a local historian, described an evening when she lingered near the stone hands after completing her research. She watched as the last rays of sunlight left the cemetery, and the shadows deepened around the gravestone. Slowly, she noticed the fingers of the carved hands shifting, the hands seeming to clutch each other more tightly than before. As she stepped closer, a faint high-pitched sobbing reached her ears, carried on the wind. The sound was so soft it could have been imagined, yet it was unmistakably human. Terrified yet fascinated, she reached out, feeling a cold, almost clammy sensation against her own fingertips, as if unseen hands brushed hers. She recoiled, the sobs growing louder for a moment before fading entirely into the night. Other witnesses have told similar stories, each adding layers to the legend. Some describe not just movement, but the sensation of desperation emanating from the stone. The hands, they say, seem to convey emotion, longing, fear, sorrow, or even anger. A teenager who visited with friends reported that when he placed his hand against the stone, He felt an almost imperceptible pulse, as though the hands themselves were alive and struggling to reach out. He pulled away in shock, claiming he could hear faint whispers, indistinct, broken phrases, echoing across the cemetery, as though the stone was speaking in a voice carried from another world. Paranormal investigators have spent nights observing the stone hands, recording strange phenomena. Cameras capture shadows that appear and vanish across the surface of the gravestone, though no one is present. Thermographic equipment occasionally shows sudden cold spots surrounding the stone, dropping several degrees in a small radius even during warm summer evenings. EMF meters spike intermittently, hinting at some unseen energy surrounding the monument. While skeptics argue that these effects could be attributed to natural drafts, settling ground, or the influence of imagination, no one has provided a satisfying explanation for the combination of visual, tactile, and auditory anomalies reported by witnesses. Perhaps the most unnerving aspect of the stone hands is the emotional impact it seems to have on visitors. Many describe an overwhelming sense of grief and urgency, as if the stone itself is imbued with the sorrow of the two figures it depicts. Some feel compelled to speak softly, as though their own voices might disturb the presence trapped within the stone. A handful of witnesses claim to have seen shadowy figures step from behind nearby trees, at dusk vanishing as quickly as they appear, adding to the impression that the hands are connected to spirits still lingering near their resting place. Local legend holds that the stone hands commemorates a couple who died tragically, possibly separated in life or in death under violent circumstances. Some believe the figures are lovers who could not bear to be apart, their spirits bound to the stone and reaching for each other eternally. Others speculate that the hands represent a child clinging to a parent, a desperate grasp of protection or comfort that extends beyond the grave. Whatever the truth, the effect on visitors is undeniable. The gravestone conveys more than a carved image. It communicates an emotion that persists, almost as if it is alive. A few reports even suggest that the hands are not confined to their physical representation. Witnesses walking past a stone late at night have seen fleeting, blurred forms moving around it, as though the spirits themselves attempt to emerge from the stone. Sounds of shuffling, soft breathing, and the faintest cries often accompany these sightings. While no one has ever claimed harm, the intensity of the experience leaves those present shaken. A tangible reminder that some grief may transcend time and even stone. Some daring individuals attempt to touch the gravestone at night, drawn by morbid curiosity or the hope of communicating with whatever spirit may linger there. Most report feeling an icy grip, a sudden tightening around their own hand, sometimes lasting only seconds but leaving a lingering sense of dread. A few claim to have seen tears forming along the carved wrists of the stone hands, shimmering like water despite the absence of rain. The effect is so profound that even those skeptical of ghosts find themselves uneasy, hesitant to dismiss the stories entirely. The stone hands remains one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most enigmatic and disturbing features. It is a monument that straddles the line between art and haunting, memory and presence. Each night, as darkness settles over the cemetery, the hands seem to awaken, their desperate grasp a silent reminder that some bonds do not break with death. Visitors are drawn not just by curiosity but by a profound need to witness and understand the sorrow captured in stone. The echoes of human emotion that refuse to fade. Whether the hands move because of restless spirits, subtle natural phenomena, or the interplay of light and shadow, their story persists. The stone hands continue to grip the attention and the hearts of all who linger too long, ensuring that Rock Creek Cemetery's legacy of haunted monuments remains as powerful and unsettling as ever. Those who walk the paths after dark do so with caution, mindful that at any moment, the hands may shift again, and with them, the weight of centuries-old grief may reach out to claim yet another witness. The grave of the poet is one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most mysterious and enchanting sights, a modest headstone tucked among larger, more imposing monuments. By day, it seems almost ordinary. A weathered slab of gray stone, the name barely legible, surrounded by wildflowers and ivy that has crept along the edges over the decades. Visitors often pause here, leaving scraps of verse, handwritten notes, or small tokens of remembrance. They feel an unexplainable pull, a quiet sense that something lingers beyond the stone. As the sun dips below the horizon and the cemetery grows shadowed and still, the grave seems to awaken. Those who linger after dark report the faint, unmistakable sound of recitations, soft voices whispering lines of poetry that cannot be attributed to anyone present. The verses are always melancholic, tinged with longing, love lost, and the inevitable passing of time. No matter how closely one listens, the source is impossible to pinpoint. The words drift through the night air as though carried on some invisible current, wrapping around the trees and tombstones. One evening, a local writer who had come to pay her respects lingered near the headstone, notebook in hand, as the sky darkened and the lamplight along the cemetery paths flickered. She heard the first words, a soft, mournful stanza floating through the cool air. She froze, her pen trembling. The poem was familiar, yet incomplete, lines ending abruptly, as though the poet had been interrupted in the middle of creation. She tried to follow the voice, turning slowly, but no one was there. The whispers continued, weaving around her, sometimes directly behind her, sometimes above, yet never emanating from a discernible figure. The air carried the faint scent of old ink and parchment, a fragrance that seemed to emanate from the very grave itself. Others have reported similar experiences. Teenagers exploring the cemetery late at night claim to hear entire verses recited aloud, each line imbued with a deep sorrow that caused shivers to race down their spines. Some have sworn the words are specific, personal, as if the poet senses their presence and speaks directly to them. Even those who had never written poetry felt compelled to stop, to listen, and sometimes to leave their own words behind, adding to the legacy of the grave. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site describe strange anomalies. EMF readings spike intermittently, though no electrical sources exist nearby. Thermal imaging occasionally shows a faint, undulating figure near the grave, moving in a manner consistent with someone kneeling or hovering. Microphones and recording equipment capture the whispers, though playback often reveals them faint, nearly drowned by the natural rustling of leaves and distant owl calls. The effect is ethereal, as though the poet has left a fragment of himself embedded in the very atmosphere around the grave. Perhaps the most unsettling reports involve the dirt and grass surrounding the headstone. Visitors have returned the next morning to find entire verses freshly written in the soil, lines of poetry that had not been there the evening before. Some claim to have seen letters forming as they watched, delicate words etching themselves into the earth before vanishing as if erased by an unseen hand. The ephemeral nature of these writings adds to the sense that the poet is not resting but continuing to create, tethered somehow to the living world by the act of verse. Those who encounter the grave of the poet often describe an intense emotional effect. The whispers stir a sense of longing, of melancholy, of unfinished stories. Some feel compelled to cry. Others are inspired to write or recite their own poetry aloud. Even skeptics admit that the experience is disquieting, almost overwhelming in its intensity. The words seem to bypass thought and go straight to the heart, as if the poet's spirit communicates directly with the soul rather than through the ears. A few witnesses have reported seeing a shadowy figure kneeling near the stone when the recitations begin. It is indistinct, more suggestion than form, yet unmistakably human. The figure leans close to the grave, as though guiding the words from some invisible manuscript. Occasionally, visitors swear they see it lift a hand, tracing lines in the air that shimmer for a heartbeat before fading into nothing. Others describe a faint glow surrounding the headstone at the moment the recitations start, a luminescence that disappears as quickly as it comes, leaving only the memory of its presence. The mystery has drawn artists, poets, and writers from across the region, each hoping to witness the strange phenomena and perhaps leave a contribution of their own. Scraps of paper, handwritten poems, and small tokens continue to accumulate around the grave, each adding layers to the story. Yet the grave retains its haunting nature. No matter how many words are left behind, the whispers continue, the floating verses continue, and the sense of unfinished business lingers. Some speculate that the poet met an untimely death, leaving his work incomplete, and that his spirit now roams the cemetery, seeking to finish what he started. Others think that the whispers are echoes of grief, memories of life, and longing that the cemetery has absorbed over time. Whatever the truth, one fact remains constant. The grave of the poet is not a silent resting place. It is a locus of creativity, sorrow, and the unearthly persistence of art beyond death. By night, as the wind whispers through the trees and the moon casts pale light over Rock Creek Cemetery, the small headstone hums with the voice of the unseen poet. Those who listen are drawn into a world where words float on the air, where lines of verse materialize in the soil, and where one feels the eerie intimacy of being addressed by a presence that is no longer of the living world. The grave of the poet is a haunting reminder that some spirits do not rest, and some art refuses to die. The white dog of Rock Creek Cemetery is one of the more peculiar and haunting figures reported by visitors and staff alike. Unlike human apparitions, which are often shrouded in shadow and melancholy, this spectral dog exudes a quiet, watchful presence, a guardian that seems tied to the cemetery's history of grief and loyalty. Its coat is described as a pure, almost glowing white, and its eyes, when glimpsed, are said to reflect a deep intelligence and sorrow that goes beyond the understanding of the living. Sightings occur primarily along the winding lanes that thread through the older sections of the cemetery. Witnesses report seeing the dog move silently across the paths, its steps without sound, even on the crunchiest gravel. Some describe it pausing to gaze at them, its head cocked slightly to one side, before continuing its patrol. Others have had more unsettling encounters, finding the dog suddenly at their side, peering out of thin air, only to vanish when they turn to reach out. Local folklore provides one of the few narratives to explain its presence. According to legend, the dog belonged to a family who suffered great loss centuries ago. The family buried a beloved relative in the cemetery, and the dog, heartbroken, refused to leave the gravesite. In death, some say, it continued its vigil, tethered to the world of the living by loyalty and sorrow. One frequent report comes from a couple who walked the cemetery on a snowy evening. As they followed the narrow path between towering oaks, they noticed a white figure moving along the edge of the trail. At first, they assumed it was a dog from a nearby residence, but as they drew closer, they realized there was no sound, no movement of snow under its paws, no sign of breathing in the icy air. The figure paused, stared at them with eyes that seemed to gleam in the moonlight, and then faded slowly into the mist that had begun to rise from the frozen ground. Paranormal teams have documented some of the dog's more inexplicable behaviors. In winter, paw prints appear in fresh snow along lanes where no other tracks exist. These footprints are often perfectly formed, showing every pad and claw, yet they lead to no discernible destination. At times, the prints seem to stop abruptly, as if the dog had simply dematerialized into the air. Thermal imaging and infrared cameras often capture fleeting shapes and white blurs in the areas where witnesses report sightings, but the images are never stable or clear enough to identify anything concrete. Some visitors claim that the dog behaves differently depending on the person observing it. Others who intrude noisily or act recklessly report the figure disappearing suddenly, only to reappear elsewhere, almost as if it is following or monitoring the intruder. The sense of being observed is often so strong that even seasoned paranormal investigators admit to an unshakable feeling of unease when in the dog's presence. Beyond its appearances, the white dog has also been associated with a variety of supernatural phenomena. Some have reported hearing faint paw steps echoing along empty paths late at night, accompanied by a low, mournful whine that vanishes before it can be fully identified. Others have felt sudden temperature drops near the lanes where the dog is seen, a cold so sharp and localized it seems to radiate from the spectral figure itself. A few witnesses even describe seeing mist curling around the dog's legs like smoke, dissipating as the creature moves forward, leaving the surrounding area unusually still and silent. The dog has been observed in several different areas of the cemetery, but its appearances are most frequent near the oldest graves and monuments, especially in sections associated with families known to have suffered tragic losses. This has led some to theorize that the dog's spirit is drawn to sorrow, perhaps lingering to comfort, guard, or bear witness to grief that cannot rest. Its loyalty, even in death, is almost tangible, a quiet testament to the bond it had in life and the attachment that death could not sever. Despite its unsettling qualities, many visitors find the white dog a strangely comforting presence. It moves without aggression or threat, silently ensuring the cemetery remains a place of reverence. Those who encounter it often describe an odd mix of fear and warmth. Fear of the unknown and warmth from the sense that they are being watched over. Children, in particular, seem sensitive to the figure, sometimes stopping in mid-step to observe it, waving or speaking softly, even if no response comes. The white dog's legend has grown with each sighting. Some locals tell tales of how it has guided lost walkers back to the main paths or even gently nudged individuals away from areas that might be unsafe in the dark. Others say it is a sentinel, marking time and territory for spirits of the departed who roam the cemetery in other forms. Whatever the truth, its presence remains a fixture of Rock Creek Cemetery's haunted lore, an enduring reminder that some bonds do not break and some guardians never rest. In the dim light of dawn or the shadowed veil of night, the white dog continues its patrol, silent, spectral, and vigilant. It moves along the lanes and through the mist, a figure of grief, loyalty, and mystery. And profoundly otherworldly, a faithful companion in a place where life and death intertwine, forever walking the silent paths of Rock Creek. The Screaming Hollow is one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most infamous and unsettling spots. Nestled in a sunken section of the grounds, the hollow is shaded by thick trees whose branches intertwine like skeletal hands, casting long, twisting shadows across the uneven earth. Even during daylight, the area feels different, colder, quieter, as if the world itself hesitates before crossing into the hollow. Locals and cemetery staff alike warn against lingering here after dark, not out of superstition alone, but because of the stories that have grown over decades. Tales of a scream so piercing it cuts through the silence and chills the soul. The origin of the hollow's name and reputation is tied to a tragic incident long forgotten by most. Records indicate that decades ago, a young mother collapsed during the funeral of a family member in this very section. Her grief was said to be overwhelming, a violent, primal sorrow that left her body and mind shattered. Witnesses at the time claimed that her screams were so intense they seemed to reverberate across the cemetery, echoing off the stone monuments, and stirring a fear deep in the hearts of those who heard her. The woman passed soon after, but locals say her anguish did not fade with her life. Instead, it became tethered to the hollow itself, manifesting for anyone who wanders into its sunken depths long after sunset. Visitors report that the phenomenon is not subtle. Those who enter the hollow after dark often describe a sudden shift in atmosphere. The air grows heavy and oppressively still. The faint rustle of the trees above sounds amplified and sinister, and then, without warning, the scream begins. It is described as ear-splitting, carrying a raw, bone-deep agony. Some compare it to the scream of someone in unimaginable pain, a sound so human, yet so unearthly that it cannot be mistaken for any natural occurrence. The scream does not come from a discernible direction. It seems to envelope the listener, surrounding them from every angle, bouncing off unseen walls of the hollow. Those who have experienced it report more than just auditory terror. Many claim to feel a physical impact, a pressure in the chest or throat, as though the scream itself is a tangible force. Some describe a coldness that rushes up the spine, creeping through their bones, while others experience an overwhelming nausea or dizziness. It is as though the hollow absorbs the fear and grief of those who enter, amplifying the spectral wail into something nearly unbearable. Paranormal investigators have attempted to capture the phenomenon on audio and video, but with limited success. Microphones sometimes pick up faint, distorted cries, though they rarely match the intensity reported by those present. Thermal cameras often detect sudden drops in temperature or fleeting figures darting just out of frame. But the hollow resists full documentation. It seems to exist as a space where normal laws of perception are warped, amplifying sorrow and fear while remaining elusive to definitive recording. Sightings accompanying the screams are rare but profoundly disturbing. Some visitors claim to see a shadowy figure near the base of the hollow. A woman in dark, tattered clothing, her face obscured by disheveled hair or a veil. She is said to move jerkily, almost gliding above the uneven ground, her presence preceding the scream. Others report glimpsing ghostly faces pressed against the sides of gravestones, mouths open in silent anguish, only to vanish when approached. Whether these visions are projections of the hollow's grief, or residual echoes of those who once mourned, there is unknown. The scream itself varies in tone and duration, according to those who hear it. Some describe it as a short, piercing cry, cutting through the night and fading instantly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Others hear a drawn-out wail, low at first, then rising to a scream that seems to last for minutes, curling around the trees and stones, lingering in the ears long after the listener has left. Accounts often agree on one disturbing element: the scream feels personal, as if it is directed at the individual hearing it, reaching into the subconscious and dredging up their deepest fears and regrets. Despite the terror, the hollow draws a grim fascination. Paranormal enthusiasts, thrill seekers, and local historians sometimes venture into its depths, driven by the desire to witness or understand the inexplicable. The hollow has become a touchstone of Rock Creek Cemetery's spectral lore, a site where the line between memory, grief, and haunting seems to blur. Guides warn that even the bravest should respect the place, cautioning that the scream is not merely a trick of the mind, but the echo of profound human sorrow anchored in the very soil. Groundskeepers advise avoiding the hollow after dusk, and those who do enter are encouraged to carry no lights that could obscure the ambient darkness. Many report that trying to record the scream or photograph the area invites heightened activity, sudden drops in temperature, intensified whispers, or even the shadowy figure appearing closer than before. Some say the hollow reacts to attention, feeding on fear and curiosity alike, making each experience uniquely terrifying. The screaming hollow serves as a chilling reminder of how human emotion can leave lasting marks on a place. The grief of a single mother, raw and unfathomable, continues to resonate decades later, transforming a simple sunken depression in the earth into a locus of supernatural dread. Those who walk its paths after dark often leave with an unshakable sense of having witnessed something ancient, sorrowful, and intensely alive, though invisible. Whether one believes the stories or not, the hollow commands respect. It is not a site for casual exploration or amusement. It is a repository of grief, a place where the echoes of the past continue to cry out in anguish. The screams, the shadowed figures, the cold oppressive air, all combine to make the Screaming Hollow one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most haunting and memorable locations, a space where sorrow refuses to rest and the past whispers its terrible truths to those willing or foolish enough to listen. The Vanishing Priest is one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most enigmatic and unnerving apparitions. Those who have encountered him describe a figure both striking and sorrowful. A man clad in traditional clerical garb, a dark cassock with a white collar, moving deliberately. Among the oldest chapels and mausoleums, he carries a small, well-worn book tightly against his chest, and his posture exudes both reverence and burden. Witnesses often report a strange sensation when he is near, a chill in the air accompanied by a sudden quiet, as though the world itself holds its breath in his presence. Sightings of the priest are rare, but they leave a deep impression on those who see him. Visitors describe first noticing him at a distance, walking slowly along the narrow paths that wind through the cemetery's older sections. His steps are measured, almost ritualistic, and he seems to move with a purpose known only to himself. The air around him often grows noticeably colder, and some report that the faint scent of incense or candle wax accompanies his presence, though no physical source can be found. The most unnerving aspect of the vanishing priest is the moment of disappearance. Witnesses universally agree that he does not simply walk out of view or retreat behind a monument. Instead, he fades, mid-step, into thin air. One moment, he is advancing toward the mausoleums, and the next, he is gone, leaving behind only the echo of a soft footfall or the faint rustle of his robes. Those who experience this vanish report a lingering sense of awe mixed with unease, as though they had been allowed a glimpse into a reality that exists just beyond the boundaries of the living world. Many local legends attempt to explain the priest's presence. One popular theory holds that he was a caretaker or clergyman who died unexpectedly while delivering last rites to a dying parishioner or interring the dead. Because his duties were left incomplete, his spirit is said to wander eternally, bound to the cemetery paths he once traversed in life. Others speculate that he may have been a member of the clergy who sought refuge in Rock Creek Cemetery during a time of crisis and met a sudden, tragic end. Whatever the true origin, his ghostly figure has become a symbol of unfinished business, devotion, and quiet sorrow. Accounts from witnesses often include an unusual interaction. When approached, the priest may nod solemnly, as if acknowledging the observer's presence, yet he does not speak. His silence is not menacing. Rather, it conveys a solemn weight, a quiet communication of devotion and duty. Some who have lingered after seeing him claim to feel an almost physical pressure on their chest, as if the book he carries contains an unseen mass of grief or responsibility that radiates outward. Paranormal investigators note fluctuations in temperature and energy around the areas where he appears, suggesting a concentrated presence. The vanishing priest is most commonly reported near the cemetery's oldest chapels, where the architecture itself seems to amplify the haunting atmosphere. The aged stone walls, arched windows, and weathered statues provide a dramatic backdrop for the figure's silent wanderings. Nightfall brings the most vivid encounters, though there have been daylight sightings, especially on misty mornings when the cemetery is cloaked in fog. The combination of fog, shadows, and the priest's deliberate movement often makes it difficult to distinguish between natural and supernatural phenomena, leaving witnesses with an unsettling ambiguity. One particularly chilling account describes a visitor who followed the priest for several minutes as he walked toward a large mausoleum. The figure maintained his solemn pace, his hands clasping the book as he advanced. When the observer tried to step closer, the priest glanced in his direction, nodded silently, and in the next instant, simply vanished. The visitor reported that the sense of loss and reverence in that moment lingered long after, a profound impression of the weight of unfinished duty and the passage of time. Paranormal teams exploring Rock Creek Cemetery have recorded unusual electromagnetic spikes and temperature drops in the areas where the vanishing priest is most often sighted. Audio recordings sometimes capture faint, indiscernible murmurs, though these are rarely clear enough to attribute to any earthly source. Investigators speculate that the priest may be a residual haunting, an imprint of past devotion that continues to manifest intermittently for those sensitive to such energies. Others propose he is a more interactive spirit, consciously appearing to guide, warn, or remind visitors of the cemetery's solemn history. Despite the unnerving nature of these encounters, the vanishing priest is not generally regarded as malevolent. Those who see him do not report feelings of threat or aggression. Instead, the impression is one of reverence, sorrow, and continuity, a reminder that some duties, even in death, are never fully complete. His silent nod, his careful pacing, and the moments before he vanishes convey a sense of devotion that transcends the boundaries of life and death. For visitors to Rock Creek Cemetery, the vanishing priest serves as both a warning and a guide. He is a testament to the weight of unfinished business, a haunting reminder of lives and responsibilities left incomplete. To witness him is to experience a fleeting brush with something profoundly sacred and unsettling. a presence that is as much a part of the cemetery as the stone monuments, ancient trees, and winding paths. In the end, the vanishing priest remains one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most mysterious and enduring spirits. Whether he is a residual echo of a devout clergyman, a guardian of sacred grounds, or a manifestation of the cemetery's collective grief, he embodies the quiet, solemn power of devotion that lingers long after the living have gone. Those who wander the older paths of the cemetery may catch a glimpse of him, feel the cold touch of his presence, and witness a nod that carries centuries of unfinished duty. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanishes, leaving only questions, wonder, and a profound sense of the enduring weight of commitment beyond life itself. The cry beneath the crypts is one of the most unsettling and persistent legends of Rock Creek Cemetery. Long considered a place of quiet reflection and solemn remembrance, the cemetery's underground crypts carry a far darker reputation. Visitors and staff alike report hearing muffled sobs and faint wailing emanating from beneath the stone floors. Sounds that seem to seep up from deep below. Even the most seasoned groundskeepers admit to a creeping unease when walking near the crypt entrances after dusk, as though the walls themselves carry echoes of past suffering. The sounds are often described as soft at first, a low, mournful whimper, barely audible over the wind rustling through the trees. But as night falls, the cries grow louder and more insistent, often accompanied by a subtle thumping or pounding, as if someone trapped within the cold stone is desperately trying to escape. Many who have experienced the phenomenon describe a visceral reaction, goosebumps, sudden chills, and an inexplicable sense of dread that tightens around the chest. Paranormal investigators who have ventured into the crypts with audio equipment have captured recordings of faint sobbing and muffled knocks that cannot be attributed to environmental noises, and these sounds often persist long after the team has left. Attempts to physically locate the source of the cries have repeatedly failed. Guards and maintenance staff have descended into the crypts with flashlights and search dogs, combing the stone corridors and coffined chambers, only to find emptiness. The floors are solid, the walls unbroken, and no hidden tunnels or secret chambers have ever been found that could explain the source. Yet, the sobs continue to appear, sometimes in the same locations, and other times migrating across different sections of the underground labyrinth, suggesting a phenomenon that is neither random nor natural. Witnesses often report that the cries carry a haunting, emotional weight, as if they are not merely sounds, but a manifestation of anguish, frozen in time. Some claim to hear fragmented words or desperate pleas, "Help me, please," or "Let me out," whispered with such raw terror that it leaves listeners shaken for hours afterward. One particularly chilling account comes from a nighttime groundskeeper who paused near the largest crypt chamber and distinctly heard rhythmic pounding on the stone accompanied by muffled screams. By the time he called for assistance, the sounds had vanished, leaving nothing but the oppressive stillness of the tomb. Local lore suggests that the cries may belong to individuals buried in haste or tragedy. Some tales point to early interments when bodies were occasionally placed underground, before proper funerary rites could be performed, leaving restless spirits trapped within the crypts. Others speak of accidental entrapments during construction or maintenance of the underground chambers, with workers allegedly buried alive and forgotten. Whether these stories are true is uncertain, but they help explain why visitors feel such a palpable sense of sorrow when standing above the crypts. The crypts themselves are ancient, their cold stone walls etched with the names and dates of those long past. Walking along the corridors, one cannot escape the sensation of being watched, even in complete darkness. Many who venture there alone report hearing breathing that does not match their own, or the scraping of unseen footsteps echoing along the vaulted ceilings. At times, the cries are accompanied by a cold, unnatural draft, despite the surrounding chambers being sealed from the outside air. Some paranormal investigators speculate that these environmental anomalies, the cold spots, the sounds, the emotional weight, are signs of residual haunting, a powerful imprint of past suffering that continues to manifest for those who enter the space. Despite the terror that the cry beneath the crypts evokes, Some visitors are drawn to it, compelled by curiosity or a desire to witness the phenomenon firsthand. Those who linger often describe a profound sadness that seems to press against the mind and body, as though the very stones carry memories of the anguish once endured below. A few have even claimed that the sobbing responds to their presence, rising in intensity when they approach and fading when they retreat, creating the unsettling impression of a consciousness trapped within the walls. Over the years, numerous accounts have been collected, from casual visitors to serious paranormal researchers. Many are consistent. The cries are always muffled, as if heard through a thick barrier. The sound often moves along the crypt corridors, and the emotional resonance of the sobbing leaves witnesses feeling drained and sorrowful. Recordings capture eerie, low-frequency vibrations, sometimes interspersed with faintly discernible voices. Yet no one has ever been able to verify a physical cause. The cry beneath the crypts continues to baffle experts and terrify those who encounter it. It is a haunting reminder that even in places designed for eternal rest, echoes of suffering may linger, refusing to be silenced. For Rock Creek Cemetery, it serves as a chilling testament to the cemetery's long history, the lives laid to rest there, and the mysteries that remain buried in the shadows beneath the surface. The sobs, the pounding, and the feeling of unseen eyes watching ensure that the crypts remain among the most unsettling and feared locations within the cemetery. A place where the veil between the living and the lost feels perilously thin. The Soldier S March is one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most unnerving and frequently reported hauntings. Visitors walking the winding lanes after dusk sometimes hear the unmistakable sound of boots striking the gravel in precise, rhythmic cadence, as if an entire unit were passing just out of sight. The noise often begins softly, a distant echo drifting through the trees, and gradually grows louder, filling the night air with the sharp, metallic sound of disciplined marching. There is no trumpet, no bugle, only the relentless rhythm of boots on stone and soil. A haunting percussion that seems to originate from nowhere. Those who have experienced a soldier's march describe a palpable tension accompanying the sound. It is not merely auditory. The air seems charged, heavy with a sense of purpose and resolve. Some report feeling vibrations through the ground, subtle yet unmistakable, as if the very earth itself remembers the weight of men who once walked here. The phenomenon has been witnessed across several lanes of the cemetery, suggesting that these spectral soldiers are not confined to a single location, but move as though following a forgotten route, an eternal path through the cemetery they once knew in life. Attempts to locate the source are always futile. No matter how quickly witnesses turn, no figures appear. Paranormal investigators have used thermal cameras, night vision equipment, and audio recorders, often capturing faint, ghostly outlines on screen or persistent echoes of the marching, but never a tangible soldier. These apparitions never interact, never speak. They are an invisible army locked in an eternal exercise. Their purpose and origin a matter of speculation. Local lore ties the soldiers' march to the Civil War. Rock Creek Cemetery, while a peaceful resting place now, was in the 19th century a frequent burial site for soldiers who died far from their homes. Many were hastily interred, some even buried before families could attend, leaving lingering sorrow in the earth itself. Witnesses claim that the spectral soldiers are those who perished without recognition, condemned to continue their drills, their discipline and loyalty echoing long after their mortal bodies have turned to dust. The march is said to be an eternal memorial of sacrifice, a reminder that even in death, some commitments cannot be broken. One particularly chilling account comes from a night caretaker who often patrols the western lanes. He described hearing the cadence long before he saw any sign of movement. At first, he assumed it was a group of reenactors or visitors walking in formation. But as he drew closer, the steps grew louder, surrounding him in a circle of sound, yet no one appeared. The caretaker reported feeling a pressure at his shoulders, a brush of air that mimicked a passing line of soldiers. When he turned to leave, the marching abruptly ceased, leaving a deafening silence. The memory of the boots stayed with him long after he left the cemetery, an imprint that no recording or photograph could capture. Visitors who walk the cemetery alone often describe a creeping dread when the march begins. Even those who have read the history beforehand report an almost instinctual reaction, a tightening of the chest, a sudden alertness, as though some primal part of the mind recognizes the echo of armed men in formation. Some claim that the sound of the march changes according to the listener. Footsteps seem to approach more quickly, then retreat or circle behind them, creating the disorienting sensation of being surrounded. Others report glimpses of shadowy figures at the edges of vision, indistinct forms in uniform that vanish when directly observed. Paranormal investigators have suggested that the Soldiers' March could be a residual haunting, a recurring imprint left by powerful emotional energy from past tragedies. The ground of the cemetery, saturated with grief, fear, and duty, may act as a medium, replaying echoes of those who once walked there. Electronic voice phenomena often accompany the footsteps, with faint murmurs of commands in military cadence. Forward march, or right face, drifting across the recording devices. Sometimes these voices are clear, other times they are distorted and garbled, almost blending into the rustle of leaves. Another theory posits that the march represents a tether between the living and the dead, a visible reminder that Rock Creek Cemetery holds more than stones and soil. The soldiers are never aggressive, never malevolent, yet their presence is unsettling. Because it is so vividly alive in a place meant for rest, witnesses often describe leaving the cemetery with a lingering impression of cold discipline, the kind that cannot be shaken by time or sunlight. The echo of boots seems to imprint itself on memory, returning in dreams and quiet moments when least expected. Some of the most unnerving experiences occur when the march seems to interact with the environment. Trees sway, though no wind blows. Branches snap underfoot, though the paths are empty, and shadows appear to move in formation along the edge of vision. A few visitors even claim to have smelled gunpowder or leather, smells inexplicably strong in areas where no remnants remain. These sensory details reinforce the reality of the encounter, suggesting that the haunting engages more than one sense, creating a multi-layered experience that is difficult to dismiss. The Soldiers' March remains one of the enduring legends of Rock Creek Cemetery. Its combination of sound, atmosphere, and emotional weight ensures that it is remembered vividly by anyone who encounters it. Whether the footsteps are echoes of Civil War, soldiers bound to their final drill, or a manifestation of grief and memory embedded in the land, the phenomenon has become a defining element of the cemetery's haunted reputation. For those who dare to visit after dark, the sound of boots tapping in cadence along the quiet lanes is a chilling reminder that some echoes of the past will never rest. Even in a cemetery filled with memorials and tombstones, there are moments when history becomes alive. When the march of the fallen soldiers presses upon the living, and the line between past and present blurs, leaving behind nothing but the steady rhythm of the Soldiers' March, echoing endlessly into the night. The shadow in the chapel is one of the most chilling presences reported at Rock Creek Cemetery. By day, the small stone chapel seems quiet and unassuming, a place for reflection amid the towering trees and winding paths of the grounds. But as dusk settles and the sun dips below the horizon, a darkness descends not only across the cemetery, but also within the chapel itself. Visitors who wander too close after hours often describe a tall, ominous figure standing at the altar, a shadow so deep and unyielding that it seems almost corporeal. Witnesses consistently report that the figure does not move. It stands erect, its outline towering over the altar, as though commanding an invisible congregation. It never speaks, never gestures, yet its presence is profoundly oppressive. Those who have entered the chapel at night describe a sudden drop in temperature, so extreme that their breath becomes visible even during the warmth of summer. The chill seems to emanate directly from the figure, spreading outward in waves, making it difficult to focus or move. Some say the air grows thick and heavy, as if laden with centuries of whispered prayers and lingering grief. One visitor, a local historian who often explores the cemetery at night to study its architecture, recounted the first time he encountered the shadow. He had entered the chapel quietly, intending only to sketch the altar in the fading light. As he set his notebook on a pew, a deep, unnatural darkness fell across the space. There, at the altar, the tall shadow stood motionless, its edges sharper than the darkness of the room. He described a feeling of being pinned by an invisible weight, his heart pounding in reaction to the silent presence. The shadow did not advance or retreat, yet he felt its awareness pressing directly on him. When he stepped closer, intending to examine the figure, it vanished, leaving only the cold, empty chapel behind. The phenomenon has been observed multiple times by different people, each encounter reinforcing the idea that this is no ordinary trick of light or imagination. Security personnel and paranormal investigators alike have recorded sudden drops in temperature, electronic disturbances, and, in some cases, unexplained murmurs within the chapel's stone walls. Audio recordings capture faint, indiscernible whispers that seem to float around the altar, though no human voices are ever present. Photographs taken at night occasionally show a vague, dark silhouette at the far end of the chapel, always near the altar, but when reviewed, the figure's features are impossible to discern. Local legend attempts to explain the origin of the shadow. Some claim it is the spirit of a long-deceased priest, one who perished within the chapel while performing his sacred duties. According to the story, his devotion was so absolute that he could not leave the chapel, even in death, and now continues to deliver sermons to a congregation that no longer exists. Others suggest it is a more general manifestation of the sorrow and mourning that permeates the cemetery. Rock Creek Cemetery has been a resting place for centuries, and countless funerals, prayers, and private moments of grief have taken place within its walls. The shadow may be an echo of this accumulated sorrow, solidified into a form that can be perceived by the living. Paranormal experts who have studied the chapel note that the shadow seems reactive. It does not attack or chase, yet it has been reported that those who linger too long feel a growing sense of dread, a tightening of the chest, or a pressure on the shoulders. Some visitors have described hearing the faintest creak of floorboards, as if footsteps accompany the figure in perfect silence. Attempts to interact, calling out, stepping closer, or waving produce no response, though the feeling of being observed intensifies with every move. It is an encounter defined not by aggression but by sheer, unsettling awareness. Interestingly, the shadow does not appear every night. Witnesses report that it is more likely to manifest during certain conditions, just after a rain, when fog creeps along the cemetery lanes, or on nights when the moonlight casts long, slanted beams through the chapel windows. On such evenings, the shadow appears almost solid, a figure carved from the darkness itself, towering over the altar with an eerie sense of patience and permanence. Once the conditions shift, light breaks through, footsteps disturb the chapel floor, or the wind shifts outside, the figure dissipates, leaving only lingering cold and an indescribable tension in the air. The chapel's visitors describe a mix of fear and reverence. Even the most skeptical individuals find themselves unable to dismiss the shadow entirely. Those who experience it often speak of an overwhelming sense of sorrow, as though they have intruded on a private, eternal ritual. Some leave offerings, flowers, prayers, or notes, though nothing appears to change the shadow's behavior. It is both sentinel and phantom, a reminder that Rock Creek Cemetery contains layers of history, grief, and unexplained presence that transcend time. What makes the shadow in the chapel so unnerving is its silence. Unlike other hauntings that may produce sounds, movements, or physical interactions, this apparition is defined by its stillness. It is the intensity of its observation, the oppressive cold, and the awareness that it is watching without speaking that leaves an indelible impression on those who encounter it. Visitors often leave feeling both awed and unsettled, haunted not only by the shadow's image but by the realization that some presences are entirely beyond human comprehension. For anyone who ventures to Rock Creek Cemetery at night, the chapel offers a solemn and chilling reminder of the unknown. The shadow at the altar stands as a sentinel of the past, a silent figure enveloped in darkness, watching, waiting, and reminding all who enter that some corners of the cemetery are meant to be approached with reverence, and perhaps a touch of fear. Whether it is the ghost of a devoted priest, a manifestation of centuries of grief, or something entirely beyond explanation, the shadow remains an enduring and mysterious presence, eternally bound to the chapel's sacred, cold stones. The mourner's song at Rock Creek Cemetery is one of the most unsettling phenomena reported by visitors and paranormal investigators alike. Those who have wandered the winding paths at dusk or under the veil of night often recount hearing a soft, mournful singing drifting across the graves. The voice is distinctly female, carrying a haunting clarity that seems impossible to attribute to the wind or distant echoes. It hums in slow, sorrowful tones, reminiscent of an old hymn, yet no one has ever been able to identify the melody. The song's origin remains a mystery, and those who hear it often describe a feeling of being both comforted and deeply unsettled at the same time. Witnesses report that the song is not constant. It comes and goes, appearing first as a faint murmur, barely perceptible over the rustle of leaves. As one follows it, the volume swells, and the voice becomes richer, almost as if a mourner has stepped among the stones. Some claim that they have felt compelled to move toward the sound, their steps guided almost unconsciously along narrow lanes and between rows of tombstones. Yet, no matter how carefully they follow, the source always eludes them. Shadows shift and stretch across the ground, making it difficult to discern whether the singer is merely invisible or whether the sound originates from an entirely different dimension. Paranormal investigators who have explored Rock Creek at night describe the mourner's song as too clear to dismiss as imagination. Recordings often capture the sound of a voice humming low, resonant notes, layered with subtle echoes that cannot be explained by acoustics alone. Sensitive instruments detect temperature drops along the paths where the voice seems strongest, suggesting the presence of an unseen entity. Some investigators report sudden feelings of vertigo or disorientation, as if the song is warping space itself, leading them deeper into the cemetery while the landmarks around them appear to shift unnaturally. In several cases, those who pursued the melody too far found themselves returning to familiar gates or paths without ever seeing the singer, their memory of the journey fragmented and confused. Local legend offers several theories about the origin of the mourner's song. One suggests it belongs to a woman who lost her family during a sudden epidemic decades ago, wandering the cemetery at night in eternal sorrow. Others believe it is the echo of a Victorian-era funeral singer called to perform the last rites for those buried long ago. Regardless of the explanation, the voice carries an intensity that seems tied to deep grief, and those who hear it often describe a profound sense of melancholy that lingers long after the song fades. Some even claim to feel invisible fingers brushing their arms, a phantom touch accompanying the ethereal music. Several visitors have recounted unsettling personal experiences with the song. One man described following the voice into a grove of older tombstones, feeling as if the singer were just a few feet ahead. He noticed the cold seeping through his coat and the faint shimmer of fog hovering near the ground. When he reached the spot where he thought the singer would be, the song abruptly stopped. The silence was immediate, complete, and so overwhelming that he felt physically unbalanced, as though the world itself had been paused, and he was standing alone in an empty void. Others report similar experiences, often noting a strange combination of relief and dread once the singing cuts off. In addition to its auditory manifestations, the mourner's song seems to influence the atmosphere of the cemetery in subtle but disturbing ways. Animals avoid the areas where the song is strongest, and wind patterns shift unpredictably, causing leaves to swirl in unnatural spirals. Photographs taken during or shortly after the song has been heard sometimes reveal faint orbs of light hovering near the tombstones, though these orbs vanish upon closer inspection. Some paranormal teams speculate that the song acts as a kind of lure, drawing the living into areas of heightened spiritual activity, or that it is a residual echo of events so traumatic that they have left an imprint on the land itself. A particularly chilling aspect of the mourner's song is its apparent intelligence. Several accounts describe the voice reacting to movement, as if aware of the listener. When witnesses pause, the singing shifts pitch slightly, moving in a way that mimics or matches their steps. In one notable case, a group of investigators spread out to locate the source. When one person moved forward, the song seemed to shift toward another member of the group, never allowing itself to be directly approached. This has led some experts to theorize that the voice is tied not to a physical location, but to some consciousness or presence that remains bound to the cemetery. Despite its unsettling nature, some visitors have found a strange beauty in the experience. The song's melody, though unfamiliar, resonates with an emotional purity that evokes empathy and reflection. Those who encounter it often speak of the singer as a spirit of mourning rather than malevolence, a spectral presence reminding the living of the weight of loss, memory, and the passage of time. Yet the song is never predictable, never controllable, and its sudden disappearance leaves an indelible mark of unease in the mind of anyone who has heard it. Whether the mourner's song is a ghostly wail, a residual energy, or a phenomenon beyond current understanding, it remains one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most compelling mysteries. Visitors and investigators alike are drawn to the cemetery in hopes of hearing it. Despite the warnings and the growing sense of disorientation that often accompanies the experience, the song persists as a spectral lament, flowing unseen through the grave-laden paths, weaving the sorrow of the past into the present. To hear the mourner's song is to step into a realm where grief does not rest, where the air is thick with echoes of sorrow, and where every note lingers longer than it should. It is a haunting, elusive presence, one that binds listeners to the quiet yet powerful memory of lives once lived, of mourning that never ends, and of a voice that refuses to be ignored. The rustling pages at Rock Creek Cemetery is a phenomenon that has puzzled staff and paranormal enthusiasts for decades. In one of the older storage buildings, where funeral records and burial logs were kept long before the digital era, visitors have reported hearing the faint, persistent sound of pages turning. The noise is so precise that it seems as though someone is leafing through the records with careful attention. Yet every time someone investigates, the books remain undisturbed. The phenomenon has become known among cemetery staff as the rustling pages, a haunting tied to the cemetery's long and often tragic history. The building itself is unremarkable by day. Dusty shelves lined with heavy ledgers, stacks of brittle paper, and a faint smell of old ink and cedar. But at night, the atmosphere changes. Footsteps echo unnaturally, and the temperature drops sharply in the corners where the noise seems most pronounced. Many have described walking into the room only to hear a flurry of pages rustle somewhere nearby, followed by an eerie silence when they look around. The guard, shaken, left the building and never returned after dark. Historians note that the building once held records of mass burials during epidemic years, particularly cholera outbreaks and other sudden waves of illness that claimed dozens of lives at once. Many of these burials were hurried, the deceased often interred with little ceremony, leaving grieving families unable to properly mourn. Paranormal researchers speculate that the rustling pages may be a residual haunting, a psychic imprint of grief, frustration, and unfinished business imprinted onto the physical records themselves. The sound of turning pages may be the echo of those who once managed these records, tending to the dead with meticulous care even in life, now replaying their tasks eternally. Several witnesses describe the auditory phenomenon as being remarkably specific. The pages are not torn or crumpled. They move as if handled by a meticulous, careful hand. Sometimes the rustling is accompanied by faint whispers, fragmented phrases spoken in the soft, hurried tones of clerks from long ago. Words such as name, age, and plot can occasionally be discerned, almost as if the spirits are auditing the records themselves. Others claim to hear the subtle scratching of quills across parchment, even though no pens or ink have been used in the building for decades. The combination of sound and subtle movements of papers creates a chilling impression that unseen figures are still performing their duties. One of the most well-documented encounters occurred during a late-night investigation by a team of paranormal researchers. using audio recorders and thermal imaging cameras. They attempted to capture evidence of the rustling pages. Around midnight, the sound began, a low, deliberate turning of pages from the far corner of the room. Cameras picked up a faint heat signature hovering near the shelves, roughly human-shaped but translucent, as if someone had passed from the past into the present. The audio captured the rustling, interspersed with soft murmurs, repeating the same words over and over. When the team approached the shelves, the sound moved to the opposite side of the room, impossible to pinpoint or stop. The activity lasted for over 20 minutes before abruptly ceasing, leaving a room of investigators shaken and unnerved. Other visitors have reported feeling a palpable sense of urgency when the rustling pages manifest. Some describe an almost physical sensation of papers brushing their hands or arms as they move through the room, even though nothing is visible. The feeling is accompanied by a creeping chill, often forming frost on nearby surfaces in winter. Though the rest of the building remains at a normal temperature, many who have experienced it describe an overwhelming impression of unfinished work, of tasks left undone, and of meticulous attention to duties that can never be completed. It is as though the spirits of the clerks, or perhaps of the deceased themselves, are insisting that every record be exact, every name accounted for, and every detail remembered. Local lore adds another layer of intrigue. Some say that the rustling pages are a reminder of those who died without ceremony. Their spirits restless because their final records were managed in haste. Others claim that the phenomenon acts as a warning, a manifestation of grief left unresolved. Groundskeepers often advise visitors not to linger in the building after dusk, and they speak quietly of the papers that move on their own and the low murmurs that seem to echo through the walls. Paranormal investigators, however, are drawn to the building, viewing it as a concentrated site of spectral activity, a place where sorrow and memory have solidified into a persistent haunting. Interestingly, the rustling pages have been observed across multiple generations of visitors. Accounts from older staff describe seeing the phenomenon in the 1970s and 1980s, and newer reports continue into the present day. This continuity suggests that the haunting is not a one-time event, but an enduring feature of the cemetery's spiritual landscape. It appears to be tied not just to the physical records themselves, but to the memory of those whose lives and deaths are documented within them. Every ledger, every page, seems to hold an echo of the past, replaying the meticulous work of those who handled the details of death in life. Despite the fear and unease it inspires, some visitors report a strange sense of reverence when experiencing the rustling pages. There is a recognition of the care and devotion required to manage records for the deceased, a reminder that even in death, lives are acknowledged and remembered. The haunting is not overtly malevolent, yet its persistence and the intensity of its manifestations leave a lasting impression, as if the spirits are simultaneously caring for and warning the living. In conclusion, the rustling pages remain one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most enigmatic and chilling phenomena. The sound of pages turning, the shifting papers, the whispers and forgotten languages, all point to a lingering presence tied to memory, grief, and meticulous devotion. Visitors who encounter it cannot help but feel that the spirits remain deeply invested in the details of the dead, ensuring that every record is complete, every name remembered, and every story accounted for. The rustling pages is a haunting reminder that even in the quietest corners of the cemetery, the past refuses to stay silent, whispering insistently through time and the fragile, turning pages of history. Near one of the smaller, less traveled entrances of Rock Creek Cemetery, visitors occasionally glimpse the figure of a young boy, dressed in clothing reminiscent of the early 20th century, knee-length trousers, a worn jacket, and a flat cap perched atop his head. He stands silently, clutching a small wooden toy horse in his arms. The first reports of the boy date back decades, yet each account shares strikingly similar details. His stillness, his quiet sorrow, and the sense that he is waiting for someone who will never arrive. Those who encounter him describe an immediate chill in the air, a sudden drop in temperature as though the world around the boy has slipped into an eternal autumn. Passers-by often feel the hair on their arms stand on end. A prickling awareness that something unseen has entered their space. He never moves toward anyone, nor does he acknowledge attempts at conversation. His gaze, however, is fixed and mournful, filled with longing that seems almost tangible. Many report that meeting his eyes produces an overwhelming feeling of grief, as if centuries of sorrow have condensed into the briefest encounter. Some visitors have attempted to approach the boy, hoping to offer comfort or simply to speak to him, only for him to vanish before they can reach him. One woman described taking careful steps toward him, her heart pounding, only to have him dissolve into a soft mist that hung in the air for a moment before disappearing entirely. Another witness swore she felt the toy horse brush against her hand as it vanished, though nothing remained in her grasp. The boy's sudden disappearance adds to the unsettling sense that he exists in a liminal space between the living and the dead, never fully part of either world. Psychics and paranormal investigators who have studied the area offer explanations rooted in history and energy. Many believe the boy is a spirit tied to the tragic events of the early 20th century, particularly the influenza epidemic of 1918. Rock Creek Cemetery, like many cemeteries of the period, became the final resting place for countless children who died unexpectedly and whose families were often stricken with grief or illness themselves. The boy by the gate may be one such child, eternally waiting for parents who never returned, replaying the moment of separation over and over. Several paranormal teams have reported anomalies in the boy's vicinity. Electronic equipment often malfunctions inexplicably near the entrance where he appears. Cameras fail to record clear images, and audio devices pick up faint whispers that seem to fade as investigators attempt to focus on them. Some describe hearing soft giggles or the creak of small shoes on gravel, only to find the paths empty. These phenomena are consistent with residual hauntings, where traumatic or emotionally charged events leave an imprint on the environment. The boy's toy horse, small and well-worn, is an especially striking element in these accounts. It is not unusual for haunted objects to retain energy connected to the deceased, and the toy may serve as a focal point for his lingering presence. Witnesses report that he often hugs it tightly, almost desperately, as though it is the only comfort he possesses. The horse's small form, gripped with such insistence, conveys a profound vulnerability, amplifying the emotional weight of encountering him. Some psychics suggest that the toy is an anchor, tethering the boy to the cemetery until his unresolved grief or longing finds resolution. Accounts of the boy extend beyond casual visitors. Groundskeepers have also encountered him during their evening shifts, particularly in low light or during misty mornings. One worker described walking near the gate and noticing a small figure standing silently, the cap shadowing his eyes. As the worker slowed, the boy remained motionless, clutching his horse as though frozen in time. When the worker blinked, he was gone. Such encounters suggest that the boy is not merely a visual hallucination induced by fear or fatigue, but a persistent presence in a specific location, tied to the gate where entrances and exits converge, perhaps symbolic of the transition between life and death. Some of the most unnerving encounters involve the emotional weight left behind. Witnesses often report lingering sadness, an echo of the boy's sorrow that persists even after he vanishes. Visitors have described walking away from the gate with an inexplicable heaviness, their thoughts filled with images of children lost too soon. This emotional residue reinforces the idea that the boy is more than a fleeting specter. He embodies the grief of countless families and the unresolved anguish of a life cut short. The boy's presence has also inspired subtle acts of care among those who visit Rock Creek Cemetery. Some leave small toys or flowers near the gate, believing that offering a token of remembrance may bring him comfort or at least acknowledge his existence. Occasionally, reports indicate that items left behind have shifted or disappeared, suggesting that the boy may engage with these gestures in some way, even if only symbolically. It is as if the spirit responds to recognition, craving acknowledgement from the living to validate his continued presence. In the end, the boy by the gate remains one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most haunting and enduring mysteries. He is a silent sentinel of sorrow, a figure frozen in time, holding a small wooden horse as he waits for those who will never come. Whether he is the spirit of a child lost to epidemic, an echo of collective grief, or something else entirely, his appearances evoke both fear and compassion. Visitors who encounter him are left with the indelible impression that some part of the past refuses to rest, reminding the living that sorrow and longing can transcend time, lingering in the spaces where life and death converge. Near the center of Rock Creek Cemetery stands a tree, unlike any other, twisted, gnarled figure that draws attention both for its age and for the eerie rumors that surround it. Locals call it the tree that bleeds, a name that evokes a sense of dread and fascination in equal measure. Its bark is dark and knotted, as though the trunk itself has endured centuries of sorrow. And from its grooves seeps a thick, reddish sap that glistens unnaturally in the daylight. To the casual observer, it may appear merely as natural resin, but those familiar with the cemetery speak of it in hushed tones, insisting that the fluid resembles blood more than anything else. The first reports of the tree's peculiar excretion date back nearly a century. Visitors claim to see the dark sap dripping steadily along the trunk, pooling in the roots at its base. Some describe streaks that seem to form patterns, almost like veins tracing the tree's tortured surface, while botanists have argued that the tree, a species of old oak, simply produces resin in response to injury or infection. The timing and consistency of the bleeding has never been fully explained. Witnesses insist that the sap appears most vividly at night or during stormy weather, as though the tree itself reacts to emotional energy lingering in the cemetery. Local legend holds that the tree was planted atop an unmarked grave, the resting place of someone whose life ended tragically or unjustly. Some suggest it was a child lost to disease, while others whisper of a murder victim buried in secret, hidden beneath layers of soil and stone. According to these tales, the tree's bleeding is a physical manifestation of mourning, a sentinel that refuses to forget the injustice of its charge. Visitors who linger beneath its branches often report an oppressive feeling of grief, as though the air itself has thickened with sorrow. Paranormal investigators visiting the site frequently report unusual phenomena near the tree. Electromagnetic field (EMF) detectors spike dramatically when placed near the trunk. Even when other parts of the cemetery show no such activity, recorders pick up faint whispers or low hums, sounds that vanish when one tries to trace their source. One investigator described a sensation of being watched, accompanied by sudden chills and goosebumps, despite clear weather and no nearby wind. These repeated anomalies have made the tree that bleeds one of the most intriguing and unsettling sights in Rock Creek Cemetery. Many visitors recount experiences that blur the line between natural and supernatural. One witness claimed to see droplets of the red sap form shapes in the air, as if suspended in mid-fall before disappearing. Another swore that at the base of the tree, small footprints appeared in the dirt, although no child or animal had been present. Perhaps the most disturbing accounts involve those who dared to touch the tree. Several have reported feeling an icy sensation spreading through their fingers, followed by an overwhelming sadness that lasts long after they move away. Some even speak of faint whispers that seem to speak directly to them, calling out names or murmuring incomprehensible phrases. The tree's uncanny presence has inspired rituals and precautions. Paranormal enthusiasts often leave candles, flowers, or small tokens at its base, both to honor the rumored spirit beneath it and to attempt communication with the lingering energy. Occasionally, candles will be found extinguished in strange patterns, or flowers displaced in ways that seem deliberate. It is as though some unseen entity interacts with offerings, acknowledging attention but maintaining a careful distance. Groundskeepers, on the other hand, avoid the tree after dusk, claiming that the atmosphere grows heavy and oppressive, as if the weight of centuries presses down upon anyone standing too close. Accounts of sightings and experiences vary, yet all share common threads: the vivid redness of the sap, the sudden chill in the air, and the overwhelming sense of grief or unease that permeates the area. Some have even suggested that the tree responds to emotions, bleeding more heavily when a mourner stands beneath its branches. Couples or families visiting the cemetery have reported tears forming spontaneously, or feelings of sorrow, not tied to any personal loss. It is as though the tree absorbs emotional energy, mirroring the pain that surrounds it. There are also stories of fleeting visions near the tree. One visitor described seeing a shadowy figure crouched at the roots, barely visible in the dim light, vanishing the instant they attempted to get closer. Another claimed that the sap itself appeared to pulse, moving in patterns that suggested life rather than the passive exudation of resin. These accounts, repeated over decades, have cemented the tree that bleeds as both a symbol of mourning and a locus of unexplained phenomena within the cemetery. The tree's reputation has grown beyond mere local legend. Paranormal documentaries and ghost tours frequently include it as a primary point of interest, emphasizing both its visual eeriness and the chilling experiences reported there. Those who have spent time observing or investigating the tree agree on one point: it exudes a presence that is impossible to ignore. Even skeptics admit a tangible change in atmosphere when standing beneath its branches, a feeling that is difficult to explain by natural means alone. Ultimately, the tree that bleeds is a reminder of Rock Creek Cemetery's long history of sorrow, tragedy, and lingering spirits. Whether its bleeding is a natural phenomenon, a psychological response to fear and suggestion, or a true paranormal manifestation, it continues to captivate and terrify those who encounter it. It stands gnarled and silent, a sentinel over the dead, a living monument to grief. Visitors leave with the memory of its crimson sap, the icy chill in the air, and the unsettling impression that the tree sees, remembers, and mourns. The tree that bleeds remains one of the most unsettling and mysterious presences in the cemetery, a symbol of loss and remembrance that refuses to fade. Those who wander near it at night do so with trepidation, aware that beneath its branches, sorrow is not just a memory, it's alive. Rock Creek Cemetery is a place of serene beauty, filled with towering oaks, winding paths, and countless monuments commemorating lives long past. Yet, among the gentle quiet and the soft rustle of leaves, some visitors have reported experiences, far less peaceful moments, that leave them chilled to the bone. Among these, one of the most mysterious and frequently reported phenomena is known as the hand on the shoulder. It begins subtly. A visitor, walking alone down one of the cemetery's quiet lanes, might suddenly feel the sensation of a hand resting lightly on their shoulder. It is never heavy or violent, never a push but rather gentle, as though someone is attempting to guide them, or perhaps offer comfort. The feeling can be fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, yet it leaves a distinct impression, a shiver, a racing pulse, a strange awareness of presence. Those who experience it often report turning around immediately, expecting to see a friend, a fellow visitor, or a groundskeeper nearby. But the space behind them is always empty. No figure, no shadow, no evidence of anyone else's presence. The hand, they say, is there and then gone, leaving a lingering sense of unease or wonder. Depending on the individual's state of mind, some describe the sensation as icy cold, like touching frost-laden stone, while others describe it as warm, almost human, carrying an inexplicable softness that contrasts sharply with the eeriness of the setting. The experience is not limited to one area of the cemetery, though several locations seem to provoke it more frequently. The Adams Memorial, with its mournful weeping angel, is a hotspot, as is the path near the old fountain, where the spectral children are said to play. Witnesses claim the hand often makes contact when one pauses to observe a grave or monument, as if the spirit wants acknowledgement or simply wishes to remind the living of the lingering presence of those who have passed. Alongside the tactile sensation, many visitors report additional sensory phenomena. Frequently, the touch is accompanied by the faint, sweet smell of flowers, freshly picked roses, lilacs, are present. Some perceive a whisper, almost imperceptible, that seems to murmur reassurance, or names long forgotten. Others claim a sudden chill or a subtle pressure in the air, as though the spirit itself has entered the space around them. Accounts of the hand on the shoulders span decades, with stories preserved by local historians, ghost tour guides, and paranormal investigators. One frequent visitor, a retired teacher who walked the cemetery's paths weekly, described feeling the hand while standing alone by a family plot. She turned slowly, expecting a companion, but found only the evening shadows stretching across the gravestones. Later, she recounted, she felt a profound sadness wash over her, a sorrow so intense it brought tears to her eyes, followed by the comforting warmth of the hand once more before it faded completely. Paranormal teams visiting the cemetery have attempted to document the phenomenon scientifically, though success has been elusive. EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and audio recorders have occasionally picked up anomalies near the areas where the hand is reported. A faint figure, partially blurred in infrared footage, or a sudden spike in electromagnetic activity when no electronic devices are present, has been recorded on multiple occasions. Still, the very nature of a touch makes it difficult to capture with cameras or instruments, leaving much of the evidence anecdotal but compelling in its consistency. Theories abound regarding the identity and purpose of the hand. Some suggest it is the touch of a mourning spirit, a soul tethered to the cemetery by grief or unfinished business. Others believe it may be the gentle guidance of someone who died tragically, offering comfort to the living in their own moment of reflection. Psychics who have walked the grounds suggest that the hand often belongs to someone who felt unacknowledged in life, now reaching out to remind passersby of their existence. Some even propose that the touch is a protective gesture, guarding visitors from wandering into areas of spiritual intensity or danger, much like the keeper of the gate seen near one of the older entrances. While the hand rarely harms anyone, the experience is universally unforgettable. People describe an immediate awareness of the presence of those who have passed, an intimate contact bridging the living and the dead. For many, the sensation carries a dual weight, a sudden fear mixed with awe, and often a lingering sense of being seen, remembered, or gently guided. Those who encounter it often leave the cemetery changed, their view of the quiet paths, the headstones, and even life itself, subtly altered. The hand on the shoulder remains one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most subtle yet unnerving phenomena. Unlike shadowy figures, ghostly children, or floating lanterns, it is intimate and invisible touch that connects the living directly to the spirits lingering in the cemetery. Visitors are drawn to it, whether out of curiosity or reverence. And while few can explain the sensation, many accept it as an unspoken communication from the past. Ultimately, the hand is a reminder of the cemetery's history, its sorrow, and its enduring presence. The spirits of Rock Creek, whether mourning, guiding, or simply lingering, manifest in ways that defy understanding. A simple touch on the shoulder can convey grief, comfort, warning, or connection, proof that even in silence and stillness, the dead are not truly gone. Visitors leave with the memory of that brief, chilling contact, the perfume of invisible flowers, and the sense that somewhere in the shadows, someone or something is still watching over them, offering comfort from beyond the grave. Rock Creek Cemetery is a place steeped in history and quiet reflection, but it is also a haven for stories of lingering spirits and unexplained phenomena. Among the most haunting of these is the apparition known as the Silent Bride, a spectral figure that has captivated visitors and paranormal enthusiasts alike for decades. Those who have encountered her describe a scene that is both beautiful and unsettling. Young woman, resplendent in a flowing white gown, drifting slowly along the shadowed lanes near the Adams Memorial. Her gown seems to shimmer faintly in the moonlight, as if woven from threads of silver mist, and her veil, always drawn across her face, adds an air of profound mystery and sorrow. The Silent Bride is rarely seen during the day. Her appearances are almost exclusively nocturnal, and she is most often reported on nights when the moon is full, casting silvery light across the cemetery's winding paths. Witnesses describe a sense of stillness in the air when she appears, a quiet so absolute that it seems to absorb all ambient sound. Footsteps halt, the wind softens, and even the rustling leaves grow silent, as though the cemetery itself pauses to watch her passage. Those fortunate, or some might say unfortunately, enough to witness her often recall a chilling blend of beauty and melancholy. The figure glides with a grace that seems unnatural, as if floating rather than walking. Her veil obscures her features entirely, leaving only the impression of a sorrowful presence. Some visitors report a faint fragrance accompanying her, a subtle blend of roses and lilies, the kind traditionally associated with weddings and mourning alike. This scent lingers after she has vanished, leaving a haunting reminder that she was there. Local legend holds that the silent bride is the spirit of a woman who died tragically on her wedding day. Accounts differ on the circumstances of her death. Some say she was overcome with grief at the last moment, discovering betrayal or misfortune, while others insist she perished in an accident just hours before the ceremony. What remains consistent across the stories is her absence of a marked grave, a fact that ties her sorrow eternally to the paths of Rock Creek Cemetery. Her unfulfilled ceremony and untended resting place are said to have bound her spirit to the earthly plane, wandering among the monuments and trees that frame the Adams Memorial. Encounters with the silent bride are often accompanied by sensations that defy explanation. Witnesses describe sudden drops in temperature, a prickling along the skin as if the air itself carries her presence, and a subtle tug at the heart, a mixture of fear and empathy. Some have even reported hearing faint whispers or the soft rustle of her gown brushing over the fallen leaves, though no sound source is visible. In more intense experiences, visitors feel an invisible presence following them along the paths, as though the bride is guiding or, perhaps lending, they know not where. Paranormal investigators who have explored Rock Creek Cemetery at night have documented unusual phenomena near the Adams Memorial and the surrounding lanes. Infrared cameras occasionally capture fleeting shapes that resemble a human figure, sometimes glowing faintly, while EMF detectors spike inexplicably as the figure appears and vanishes. Audio recorders have picked up soft, indecipherable murmurs that some believe are the bride's silent voice, forever mourning her lost day of celebration. These occurrences are sporadic and unpredictable, adding to the sense that the silent bride chooses when and where to reveal herself. Despite the haunting nature of her presence, the silent bride is not considered malevolent. Visitors often describe a mixture of fear and reverence, a feeling that they are witnessing a deeply personal sorrow rather than a threat. Some who follow her cautiously along the paths report an unspoken understanding, a fleeting connection to her grief, before she slowly dissolves into the night mist, leaving only silence in her wake. Others have left small flowers along the path, a tribute to her lost wedding day, feeling that the gesture is acknowledged in some intangible way by the spectral figure. Stories of the silent bride have persisted for generations, passed down from cemetery staff to local historians and nighttime visitors. Groundskeepers recall personal experiences of spotting a faint figure gliding among the graves, often noting a sudden heaviness in the air or the sensation of unseen eyes watching. Paranormal enthusiasts have compiled dozens of eyewitness accounts, each describing the same glowing white gown, the drawn veil, and the slow, deliberate movements along the paths, while skeptics suggest tricks of light, wind, or imagination. The consistency of the reports, decades in length, has ensured that the legend endures. The silent bride's haunting serves as a reminder of the delicate boundary between life and death, joy and sorrow, fulfillment and loss. She embodies a story paused mid-journey, a life interrupted, and a celebration that never came to pass. Her presence at Rock Creek Cemetery offers a glimpse into a world where grief lingers and the echoes of human experience refuse to fade entirely. For those walking the quiet paths under the silver glow of the moon, awareness of the silent bride can transform a simple stroll into an encounter with the past itself, whether seen from a distance, sensed in the air, or felt in the inexplicable chill of her passing. She represents both the beauty and the sadness of Rock Creek Cemetery. She glides silently, unseen by most, yet deeply felt by those who witness her fleeting apparition. The silent bride remains one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most poignant and mysterious spirits, a reminder that even amidst the solemn peace of the gravestones, Stories of love, loss, and longing endure. To glimpse her is to encounter the enduring sorrow of a life interrupted, a wedding never celebrated, and a soul forever wandering among the tombs. Shrouded in white and enveloped in moonlight, in the quiet expanse of Rock Creek Cemetery, amid weathered tombstones and shadowed pathways, stands a figure that has captivated the curiosity of visitors and paranormal enthusiasts alike. Known simply as the guardian angel that moves, this statue is far more than a piece of funerary art. Carved from white marble, the angel rests atop a tall pedestal, wings outstretched in an eternal embrace, her gaze solemn and her expression serene. By day, she appears frozen in a single, graceful pose, a timeless sentinel overseeing the graves below. But by night, or when few eyes are watching, the angel becomes something far more unsettling, something that seems alive. The first reports of the angel's shifting posture came decades ago, passed down quietly among groundskeepers and regular visitors. One observer claimed that, while standing near the base of the pedestal, he noticed the angel's head subtly tilt from gazing toward the sky to looking down toward the stones. At first, he assumed it was a trick of light or his own eyes straining in the dim evening. Yet as he circled the statue, he realized the position remained changed, unnatural for solid marble. The sense of unease that followed was compounded by a sudden chill in the air, a cold draft that seemed to emanate directly from the stone itself. Over the years, more witnesses have shared similar experiences. Some describe seeing the angel raise one hand, palm extended as if bestowing a blessing upon the cemetery below. Others claim her wings appear to stretch and curl ever so slightly, the feathers catching light in ways that defy explanation. These changes are never violent or grotesque. They are subtle, almost reverent, but they carry an unmistakable weight. Those who witness them often report feeling a deep, almost oppressive energy, as though the angel is aware of their presence and silently judging, or perhaps protecting, the grounds. Paranormal investigators have taken a particular interest in the guardian angel EMF. Readings near the pedestal often spike unexpectedly, even in the absence of electrical devices. Thermal cameras have recorded brief glimmers of light along the wings and hands that cannot be explained by sunlight or reflections. Audio devices, when left running during quiet nights, sometimes capture faint whispers, almost like a prayer carried on the wind, though no one is visibly present. The changes in posture are the most compelling anomaly. Investigators have positioned cameras to watch the statue for hours, only to discover later that its stance has shifted. Yet no human interference is visible on the footage. The angel's unusual behavior is often accompanied by a profound emotional reaction from observers. Those who have stood before it report sudden feelings of weighty sorrow, followed by a sense of protection. Some describe memories or images surfacing, unbidden visions of loved ones long gone, moments of grief from years past, or flashes of joy and loss intertwine. One visitor recalled kneeling briefly before the statue, only to feel the marble hand reach toward him. Though no physical contact occurred, a strange warmth followed the sensation, and when he looked again, the hand had returned to its original position. Local lore suggests that the angel was carved to commemorate a family lost to illness in the late 1800s. According to legend, the eldest daughter had been particularly devoted to the cemetery, spending countless hours among the graves and praying for the souls of the departed. When she passed, her family commissioned the angel as a final guardian, and some say the spirit of the girl became entwined with the sculpture, giving it the inexplicable ability to move. Whether this is true remains uncertain, but the story has persisted, giving the statue an air of reverence and fear. Visitors sometimes leave small tokens at the base of the pedestal, flowers, notes, or photographs, in the hope of garnering the angel's blessing or simply showing respect. The shifts in the statue's posture are often accompanied by subtle environmental changes. Many report sudden drops in temperature or a stillness in the wind, even on breezy nights. Others hear faint sounds, a rustle of stone against stone, a whisper of wings, a sigh that seems to emanate from nowhere. One witness described the sensation of being followed as she walked away from the statue. feeling the weight of the angel's gaze even as she moved across the cemetery's paths. Such encounters are brief, but they linger in the memory, leaving a sense that the cemetery itself is alive, watched over by this silent, shifting sentinel. Skeptics, of course, argue that the perceived movement is the result of changing light, optical illusion, or the human tendency to assign meaning to still objects. Yet the consistency of reports, spanning decades and including multiple independent witnesses, makes the guardian angel difficult to dismiss entirely. The statue's subtle shifts seem to defy any natural explanation, and the emotional resonance felt by observers reinforces the idea that this is no ordinary sculpture. The guardian angel that moves has become one of Rock Creek Cemetery's most enigmatic and haunting figures. She embodies both the reverence and unease of the grounds, a reminder that art and memory can intertwine with the supernatural. Those who have encountered her speak of a presence that is protective, yet sorrowful, a guardian who watches over the dead while interacting subtly with the living. Even in the bright light of day, her story lingers in the minds of visitors, a testament to the strange and inexplicable phenomena that have made Rock Creek a magnet for tales of ghosts and spirits. For those who ventured to the cemetery in quiet hours, standing before the shifting angel is an experience both beautiful and unnerving. To witness the statue's subtle movements is to feel the weight of unseen sorrow, the brush of a spectral hand, and the awareness that some spirits do not rest, even in stone. The guardian angel remains a mystery, silently observing the paths below, shifting imperceptibly, and reminding all who see her that grief, guardianship, and the unexplainable can endure beyond the limits of life and death. Nestled among the winding paths and shaded oaks of Rock Creek Cemetery lies a bench unlike any other, weathered by decades of wind and rain. The stone seat appears ordinary at first glance, its surface cracked and pitted, the color dulled by years of exposure. Yet, visitors who have dared to sit upon it soon realize there is nothing ordinary about this cold, unyielding stone. Locals and frequent wanderers of the cemetery have long called it simply the cold seat, a place where warmth seems to vanish and an unseen weight settles over anyone who dares to rest there. From early morning until late afternoon, the bench remains inexplicably frigid. Even in the peak of summer, when the sun beats down relentlessly on surrounding paths and monuments, the stone retains a chill that seeps into the skin. Many assume the cold is the result of underground water or a natural stone anomaly, but those who have experienced it describe sensations that defy explanation. It is more than temperature. It is a sensation that presses upon the chest, as if grief itself has been carved into the stone. The first recorded accounts of unusual experiences at the cold seat date back nearly a century. Cemetery staff recalled mourners and visitors reporting feelings of sudden sorrow when sitting, often accompanied by the faint sound of names whispered on the wind. Sometimes the voices were clear, calling out in tones of despair, almost as if someone were recounting the tragedies of the past. At first, skeptics dismissed these experiences as imagination, heightened by the solemn surroundings of the cemetery. Yet, as reports multiplied and patterns emerged, the legend of the cold seat grew, becoming one of Rock Creek's most chilling and enduring mysteries. Those who have sat upon the bench often describe a sudden flood of memories and emotions. Some feel the presence of mourners from long ago, invisible figures gathering in the shadows, speaking of loss and longing. Others experience fleeting visions, a mother weeping over a loved one's grave, a soldier's widow clutching a folded letter, children wandering aimlessly, their laughter hollowed by grief. These apparitions are rarely seen fully. Instead, they brush the edges of perception, a reminder that the past lingers in ways the living cannot always understand. Paranormal investigators have been drawn to the cold seat for decades, attempting to capture evidence of its unsettling phenomena. EMF readings often spike around the stone, sometimes to levels that defy natural explanation. Temperature sensors record rapid drops in a small, localized area directly on the seat, often several degrees lower than the surrounding air, with no apparent source of the chill. Audio recordings capture faint whispers, indistinct at first, but when enhanced, certain words become discernible names of people long gone, cries of grief, fragments of messages that may have been lost to time. One investigator describes sitting on the bench at dusk and suddenly feeling a hand resting lightly on his shoulder, though when he turned, no one was there. Historians suggest that the bench's haunting may be tied to the events of the mid-19th and early 20th centuries. During the Civil War and later conflicts, Rock Creek Cemetery served as a place of both mourning and public gathering. Letters bearing devastating news were often delivered here, and mourners would receive word of loved ones lost in battle while seated among the stone markers. The bench may have become a nexus for grief, absorbing the anguish of those who sat there and imprinting it into its very structure. The cold seat, then, is more than a piece of stone. It is a vessel for sorrow, a place where the past refuses to release its hold. Witnesses often describe the emotional impact as nearly overwhelming. A visitor who sat briefly reported that her chest felt heavy, her eyes stinging with tears that came unbidden. She heard a soft murmur of a man's voice whispering her name and felt a shiver that ran from her shoulders to her fingertips. Another recounted feeling the presence of a woman in mourning, standing silently behind her, yet not threatening, simply sorrowful, as if sharing her burden. Some have fled the cemetery after mere moments on the bench, unable to bear the intensity of the emotions it awakens. The cold seat has also drawn a curious fascination for those who seek communion with the other side. Mediums and psychics have visited, claiming that the bench allows them to sense the emotional residue of countless mourners. In some cases, they report seeing fleeting images of those who once received tragic news here, frozen in moments of despair, their grief looping endlessly through time. One psychic described an overwhelming sense of empathy, as if the bench channels not only sorrow, but also the lingering desire to comfort and console those left behind. Despite her, perhaps because of its chilling reputation, the bench remains a point of quiet interest within Rock Creek Cemetery. Visitors often leave small offerings nearby, a flower, a note, or a token of remembrance. Some do so as a mark of respect, others as a gesture of curiosity, seeking to connect with the weight of history that rests upon the stone. At night, the bench is avoided by many, yet those brave enough to approach after dusk often report the most intense experiences, with whispers clearer and coldness sharper, as though the cemetery itself is recalling memories long since buried. The cold seat serves as a reminder that the past is never fully gone. It is a place where sorrow has been preserved, a silent witness to the grief of generations. Whether one believes in ghosts or the lingering energy of emotion, it is impossible to deny the impact the bench has on those who encounter it. It is a physical embodiment of mourning, a tangible connection to lives lost, and the weight of unspoken farewells. For those who venture to Rock Creek Cemetery, sitting upon the stone bench is more than a simple rest. It is an experience that touches the deepest parts of the heart, a brush with emotions that transcend time. The cold seat stands as both a monument and a mystery, offering a chilling but profound encounter with the sorrow of the past, ensuring that the grief it holds will never be forgotten. Among the winding paths and shadowed groves of Rock Creek Cemetery, there exists a haunting presence few speak of openly: the forgotten bells. Though the large, iron bells that once marked the passing of the dead have long been removed, visitors, caretakers, and night wanderers often report hearing the faint, ghostly toll of chimes drifting through the cemetery's still air. The sound is unmistakably deep, resonant ringing that carries across the quiet grounds, cutting through the hush of night and stirring an almost palpable sense of solemnity. It is a sound that is at once familiar and impossible, a mournful echo from a time long past. Witnesses first began noting the phenomenon decades ago. Those walking the cemetery paths late at night described a sudden hush descending over the trees, as if nature itself were pausing to listen. Then, faintly at first, a soft ringing would emerge, growing clearer and more defined as one lingered in the shadows. The sound was never constant. Sometimes it came in long, drawn-out tolls. Other times, quick, successive rings, like hurried announcements of a funeral procession. Despite numerous searches, no physical source could ever be found. The bells were gone. No towers, no cables, no structure remained to explain the sound. Yet the tolling persisted, as if the cemetery itself had learned to remember the ceremonies of its past. Paranormal investigators who visited the site equipped with audio recorders and EMF meters found themselves unnerved. Audio equipment frequently captured the sound of bells ringing, where there was no conceivable mechanism for such a noise. EMF readings fluctuated, registering inexplicable spikes near the cemetery's central pathways, particularly around areas that historically held significant memorial services. Some researchers speculated that the ringing was a residual energy, an imprint of countless funerals that had taken place over the decades. In other words, the forgotten bells were not bells at all, but the memory of mourning, encoded into the very air of the cemetery. Stories from witnesses often share common elements. Visitors describe standing in one location, hearing the clear, reverberating tones, and then realizing the sound is moving with them. One caretaker recounted walking a deserted path in late autumn, the mist rising from fallen leaves, and hearing a series of low, mournful chimes behind him. When he turned, the area was empty, and the silence returned almost immediately. Yet the chill of the sound lingered, pressing on his shoulders as if the echoes carried the sorrow of those who had been mourned there. The forgotten bells are most often reported at night, when the cemetery is at its quietest and shadows stretch long among the headstones. Some theorize that the bells manifest as a response to solitude, amplifying the emotional energy of those who walk the grounds alone. Others believe they appear during the hours when the boundary between the living and the dead feels thinnest, a nocturnal reminder of the countless lives commemorated here. The tolling is never malicious. It is not threatening in the way some hauntings are described. Instead, it evokes reflection, an almost sacred pause, as though the air itself is mourning in tandem with visitors. Accounts also include strange physical sensations accompanying the sound. Witnesses report a sudden drop in temperature when the bells toll, even in warmer months. A subtle vibration sometimes runs through the earth beneath the feet, imperceptible to passers-by, but noticeable to those attuned to the phenomenon. Some describe an overwhelming sense of reverence, a feeling of weight pressing upon the chest, as if the collective grief of generations has been distilled into sound. It is this combination, the auditory and the emotional, that gives the forgotten bells their profound, unsettling power. Locals have woven legends around the bells. Some claim that the tolling occurs when a visitor unknowingly stands above the grave of someone whose story has been forgotten, or that the ringing marks anniversaries of particularly tragic deaths within the cemetery's long history. Others say that the bells are a message from the departed, a gentle reminder that even as names fade from memory, the act of remembrance endures. Paranormal groups have suggested that the cemetery itself acts as a conduit, amplifying these spectral echoes across the landscape for those sensitive enough to hear them. One of the more chilling stories involves a late-night walker who had lost a family member decades prior. As she wandered, she began to hear the tolling of the bells. The sound grew louder, and with each chime, she felt a deep, almost tangible ache in her chest, as though the sorrow of her family's past grief had been imprinted on the air. She later recounted that she was moved to tears, overwhelmed not by fear, but by the weight of remembrance. To her, the forgotten bells were not a haunting to be feared, but a bridge to those long gone. Paranormal recordings and eyewitness testimonies continue to add to the legend. Occasionally, audio captured at night reveals the ringing, appearing only in segments. Each bell toll delayed slightly, as if time itself is fractured within the cemetery. Some hear the sound emanates from areas known to be empty, or find the tone seeming to follow them, defying logic and the natural laws of sound. In every instance, those who hear the bells are left with a profound, lingering sense of loss, yet also of reverence, as if they have witnessed a sacred ritual that exists outside of ordinary perception. The forgotten bells of Rock Creek Cemetery are more than a ghost story. They are an auditory imprint of history, grief, and remembrance. carrying the echoes of funerals long past into the present. Each toll is a reminder that memory and mourning endure, even in the absence of the physical markers that once announced them. Visitors may never see a bell tower or understand its source, but the sound itself testifies to the weight of time and the lives commemorated within the cemetery. To hear the bells is to pause, to feel, and to remember. Whether they are residual energy, spectral phenomena, or the manifestation of the cemetery's collective grief, the forgotten bells remain one of Rock Creek's most poignant and chilling mysteries, a haunting that is, at once, mournful, beautiful, and impossible to forget. Among the winding paths and shadowed groves of Rock Creek Cemetery, there exists a phenomenon that chills even the most steadfast visitors. The eternal watchers. Unlike spirits that appear and vanish, or phantoms whose presence is accompanied by sound or movement, the watchers are subtler, more pervasive. They are felt before they are seen, perceived as an undeniable awareness, a prickling sensation that someone or something is observing every step. Countless visitors report this feeling, often in areas that appear entirely deserted. One may walk along a quiet lane lined with weathered stones, the fog curling low to the ground, and yet feel eyes upon them, sharp and unblinking, following their progress. The first reports of the watchers came decades ago, noted in journals kept by groundskeepers. They describe visitors pausing mid-step, suddenly aware of an intense scrutiny, only to find that the lane behind them is empty. At first, these accounts were dismissed as imagination or nerves, the natural reaction to walking among graves and monuments. But the stories multiplied, becoming too consistent and detailed to ignore. Witnesses spoke not of a fleeting chill or a shadow darting past, but of a sustained awareness, an oppressive sensation that eyes were tracking their every movement. Many described seeing figures at the very edges of their vision, vague shapes that vanish when looked at directly. Some are human and form-wearing women in long black dresses, soldiers in tattered uniforms, or children playing silently among the headstones. Others are less definable, almost mist-like, their presence implied rather than seen. The figures do not approach or interact. They do not gesture or speak. They simply observe, always on the periphery, a reminder that history, grief, and memory linger in the cemetery. Visitors often report that the sensation grows stronger near older sections of the cemetery, where Civil War era gravestones and 19th century monuments dominate the landscape. It is here that the stories of soldiers, widows, and children are most palpable. One afternoon, a young couple wandered a quiet lane beneath towering oaks, and the woman turned suddenly, insisting she felt someone watching. She caught a glimpse of a figure at the far edge of a clearing, a man in a faded blue uniform standing perfectly still, head tilted slightly downward. When she blinked, he was gone. Her companion felt the same weight of eyes upon them, despite seeing nothing at all. Paranormal investigators visiting the cemetery have noted similar accounts. Using thermal cameras, night vision equipment, and EMF detectors, they often record anomalies in the areas where the watchers are reported. Slight temperature fluctuations, unexplained shadows, and electronic interference are common, though nothing conclusively identifies the observers. Even skeptics admit that the feeling of being watched is not imagination, it's physical, tangible, and persistent. Some researchers theorize that these manifestations are residual memories, echoes of lives once lived, preserved in the very air of the cemetery. Others suggest that the watchers are guardians, spirits of those who remain to oversee the resting souls of the departed. Stories abound of visitors attempting to engage with the watchers, with unsettling results. One man, curious to confront the sensation, stopped and called out to the figures he felt observing him. The air grew suddenly cold, and a whisper of indistinct voices seemed to swirl through the surrounding trees. He later recounted that he felt 1,000 tiny eyes fix upon him, heavy with unspoken grief, warning, and expectation. After that experience, he avoided the cemetery at night, unsettled by the silent knowledge that some forces do not seek interaction, they only seek acknowledgement. Children are also said to sense the watchers, often more keenly than adults. Parents have reported their children pausing mid-play, staring into empty lanes, or pointing to spots where the adult's eye sees nothing. Some children smile or speak gently to unseen companions. Others grow suddenly tense, tugging at their parents' hands and insisting they leave immediately. It is as if the watchers choose to be seen by those most sensitive, silently communicating their presence to those who can truly feel it. The eternal watchers are never threatening in the conventional sense. They do not attack, scream, or manifest violently. Yet their presence can be overwhelming. Visitors frequently describe a tightening in the chest, goosebumps crawling along their arms, or a sudden awareness of the passage of time. Some report feeling compelled to move quietly, to speak softly, or to sit in silence, acknowledging the watchers in a silent pact of respect. Others experience the profound sorrow of those long gone, a sorrow so tangible it is almost as if the watchers transfer their memories and regrets to the living, ensuring that the weight of history is felt across generations. Those who frequent the cemetery regularly learn to navigate the sensation, treating it as part of the experience rather than a threat. They speak in hushed tones, move slowly, and pay respects to the graves they pass. Occasionally, a fleeting image or a sudden chill confirms that the watchers are near. Observing the living as the living observe the dead, the phenomenon is pervasive, subtle, and enduring, a reminder that Rock Creek Cemetery is not merely a resting place for the departed, but a space alive with memory and presence. The eternal watchers of Rock Creek Cemetery are perhaps the most unnerving of its many hauntings because they demand introspection. Unlike other ghosts or phantoms, they do not startle or frighten with sudden appearances. Instead, they confront visitors with the awareness of their gaze, inviting contemplation on mortality, memory, and the lives that shaped the cemetery. To feel their presence is to recognize the weight of countless souls, silently guarding, silently observing, and silently demanding that the living remember the stories etched into every stone. To walk among the eternal watchers is to acknowledge that history is not merely recorded in texts or monuments, but lived and remembered by those who remain. Even in solitude, even in quiet, one is never truly alone. The eyes of Rock Creek's past remain ever upon the present, a silent testament to the passage of life and death, to the sorrow and memory that persist in the shadows, and to the haunting, watchful guardians who never rest. Rock Creek Cemetery is more than a burial ground. It is a place where memory, grief, and the echoes of the past remain etched into the very air. Each of these 25 hauntings tells us that time does not erase sorrow, nor does stone silence the voices of the dead. Perhaps these spirits linger because they cannot move on, or perhaps they remain as guardians of their own stories, ensuring they are never forgotten. When you walk its shaded paths, remember to tread gently, for every statue may hold a spirit, every shadow a soul, every silence a whisper waiting to be heard. And if you ever find yourself there after dark, remember this: the dead may not be resting as quietly as we like to believe.